Okay. So can everybody see that? Okay, if you can, just hold your thumb up. Okay, good. Good. So this is the first, oops, my computer started going without me. This is the first of, eventually there are 5 modules within this new training module. And so we're going to be, like I said, we're going to be going over each one. So the first one is what is 4-H? And we're going to talk about what is 4-H, some of the organizational structure and the history, the program fundamentals, the mission mandates of 4-H, and then roles and accountability within the 4-H program. So what is 4-H? 4-H is the largest youth development organization in the entire country. We empower over 6 million young people nationwide each year with the knowledge and skills to lead for a lifetime. We believe in the power of youth. 4-H recognizes the valuable strengths and the influence that every child possesses to improve the world around them. We also, okay, you can see, youth are the key audience within the 4-H program. So we provide a hands-on learning activities with a wide array of project areas such as health, science, agriculture, citizenship, shooting sports, things like that. And really, in order for that learning environment to be positive and fun, we focus on providing a safe and supportive environment where the youth receive that guidance from caring adults. And if you have ever heard of the Search Institute, that's an organization out of Minnesota, and they work with what they call developmental assets. And so they've come up with, they say that youth need to have a set of 40 assets in order to be more successful as an adult. The more assets they have, the more successful they are. So one of the things that's really critical within those developmental assets is a relationship with a caring adult, and that is not a immediate family member. So that's where 4-H really fits in, because we are that caring adult that's not immediate. So we also encourage young people to take on leadership roles. This is how we build confidence and proficiency within our young people, and we give them a chance to practice. So whether it's located in the inner city, the suburbs, the small towns, the farms, or the most remote reaches of our nation, which those of you in Ely, one of my very favorite places in the state of Nevada is Ely, but I do know how remote it is. And so that's where it kind of, but we do provide 4-H to all of those youth. We try to make 4-H accessible to everybody. So the goal and the depth of 4-H is really unmatched with any other youth organization in the country. Again, I mentioned that we reach over 6 million youth annually throughout the country, and there are over 3,500 4-H professionals across the country, and there are over 500,000 4-H volunteers that operate under the direct supervision of the 4-H professional. So we're going to talk about how that all comes together a little bit. But first, before we do that, we don't have to. So part of the e-learning modules is you're going to be taking an assessment along the way. So does anybody have an idea of what the answer to this? You guys can just shout out letters. Actually, you know what the answer is because it says it right there. But yeah, well, So, but through their involvement in 4-H, you can see they're enjoying a safe, supportive environment. They learn leadership and communication skills, and they gain hands-on experiences. Okay, so the structure of 4-H. So 4-H and other extension programs, which if you're familiar with cooperative extension, you know that we aren't, it's not just 4-H, we have a variety of programs. They are the result of a unique three-way partnership between the federal, the state, and the county levels. So we're going to take a very simplified look at this very complex structure. I've been involved I've worked in 4-H and extension for I'm in my 24th year now. And I will tell you, there are days I don't even know what the structure is. But at the federal level, the oversight for 4-H programs comes from NIFA, which is the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, which is a division of the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture. The priorities of the federal level are then channeled through to the land-grant universities in each state. So within the land-grant university, the state land-grant university, the responsibility of 4-H is routed through the cooperative extension director and then to the respective 4-H state 4-H program administrator. So in Nevada, that would be myself. And then what my position does is I provide oversight and establish basic parameters for all of the 4-H programs within our state to follow. So then we move on to the county, and we know that to be most effective in reaching youth, that I can't do it myself. So we have to I delegate that authority to our local 4-H program managers and our 4-H program coordinators. Those individuals then work with authorized 4-H volunteers and other appropriate resources, to deliver those high-quality educational youth programs. We're going to take just a minute and we're going to watch a video. This was a video put together by National 4-H Council, and it's really great to show the history of 4-H. Whoops, I don't know why it's not working.
Began with the seed of an idea. In 1902, the Heartland needed folks to embrace new advances.
Can you guys hear that okay?
But leaders with open minds, strong hearts, and willing hands weren't in abundance. Luckily, kids were. By empowering the next generation to lead, 4-H took root and grew and grew and grew. Grew kids who are confident and strong, who are curious enough to question, and capable enough to find the answer.
You stick to a job until the job gets done. You know how to work with others and how to lead.
4-H has kept right on growing. Out of the farms and into the towns, from the suburbs to the cities.
Anywhere curiosity roams, and confidence thrives. Anywhere technology can be advanced and achievement is valued. Anywhere positive change is possible. And giving back moves entire communities forward.
When you think about it, it makes sense that we began with farming. After all, true leaders aren't born. They're grown.
All right. So to recap a little bit of the key components of that video. So in the late 1800s, universities realized that they were more likely to gain acceptance of new technology by first introducing these concepts to the young people on a small scale basis. So in 1902, Graham started the first youth program in Clark County, Ohio. That is really what was considered the precursor for the birth of the 4-H program. So those early clubs focused on corn production and the growing and processing of tomatoes. The formal launch of Extension was with the passage of the Smith-Lever Act in 1914. This is what created the Cooperative Extension Service within USDA, thus nationalizing the 4-H program. Over the years, 4-H has expanded to more than 100 land-grant universities and over 3,000 county offices nationwide, which is a combining of the federal, state, and local expertise and resources to meet the needs of the research, the knowledge, and the educational programs. So today, as the country evolves, so does 4-H. Through the land-grant university systems, 4-Hers are tackling some of today's top issues, from global food security, climate change, and sustainable energy, to childhood obesity and food safety. So this is really where we continue to dispel the myth that 4-H is just cows and cooking. You know, really today's members are involved in a lot of STEM opportunities, which includes rocketry and robots and environmental protection and computer science. They're also very involved in looking at some of the, like I said, the climate changes. One of the programs in Nevada that we've been partnering with is it's Coco Ross, which is the weather reporters. And so we have youth 4-H weather reporters across the country that have a training in how to observe the weather, and then they go on every day and they report what's happening within their community. So it's really, you know, looking at these efforts, and this is how this is really how we're improving our nation's ability in those key scientific fields. So, okay, so what are the 4-H's? Most of you probably know what the 4-H's are, right? So, but I'm going to give you a little bit of history about those. So they stand for Head, Heart, Hands, and Help, which represent a fourfold training and development that the 4-H members receive. So Head, Heart, and Hands were becoming familiar phrases with public speakers in the early 1900s. And it was with these three words that educators really expressed the liberalizing of the conventional education, the 3 R's, and wanted to include practical arts, which is the 4-H, or the 3 H's. The 3 H's were adopted by program organizers to reflect the educational theme of 4-H. And then later, the 4th H for health was added. So when you look at these, you know, together the 4-H's symbolize the development of the head to think, plan, and reason, which leads to that lifelong learning. The heart is caring, responsible, and positive behavior towards others, resulting in contributing to civic engagement. And one of the things that they have found through a lot of research is the thing that makes 4-H so much different than the other youth organizations is our contribution to community and that civic engagement. The hands is to be useful, helpful, and skillful, and to enhance long-term employability and economic stability. And then the health is to practice healthy living and productive use of leisure time, leading to happiness and overall well-being. So to remember, you know, this is to remember. Actually, I'm gonna show one more video clip.
I pledge my head to clear thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to larger service, and my health to better living. For my club, my community, my country, and my world.
Okay, so you know, as we're starting our program and working with our youth, we need to remember that young people, the youth, want to be part of a group. They want a place where they belong. So we need to make sure that our meetings have a 4-H focus, and that, you know, we're where members know that they're safe and they're accepted. So one of the ways that we can convey this sense of unity is to start each of our meetings by reciting the 4-H pledge. And so from time to time, this is just one example that you could do from time to time with your members, is as they recite the pledge, when they're finished, think of a specific line and ask them what that phrase means to them. You know, this helps bring the meaning and life to the pledge, and it also has them thinking about how they can commit and be a part of the 4-H program. So that's just one idea. I know a lot of times when we do interviews with young people, especially like with our ambassadors or with teen leaders, we ask them, so tell me, what does the phrase, my heart to greater loyalty, mean to you? And how does it relate to your 4-H experience? So that's just one idea of how to keep things keep things 4-H and really remind them of that pledge. So we're going to talk now about the use of the 4-H name and emblem. And Billy Sue has sat through my presentation on the use of the name and emblem, and this one's not nearly as long as just a few slides. But I just want to make sure everybody is aware of the protections of the name and emblem. So the term 4-H club was first used by USDA in 1918, and the 4-leaf clover emblem was approved by Congress in 1924. So today, what that did is that makes the 4-H name and emblem one of only 5 federal marks within the country. And so that gives more protections and standards. They far exceed those of trademarks and copyrights. So does anybody know what the other 4 federal trademark or federal marks are? Billy Sue, let's give, no, she just heard this like a week ago.
Smokey the Bear.
Yep, Smokey Bear.
Olympic seals.
Olympic rings, yep. Anybody else?
4-H, obviously.
Yep. One of them is, you can see that. What was it?
Red Cross.
Red Cross, yep. And one more. The presidential seal are the others. So in order to use the 4-H name and emblem, it requires formal authorization. So and it's either county, state, or federal extension personnel that depending on the intent for use is where you get the approval. So in your case, as 4-H volunteers, with your clubs, you get that permission when you finish the certification process, as well as when you charter your 4-H club. If you want to use a 4-H name and emblem for something that's going to cross county lines, then some counties like to do a fundraiser, and sometimes it'll cross county lines. Then that's when you have to come to the state for permission. And then also if it crosses state lines, then we have to go to USDA for that approval. Now, in your guys' case, where I know that you have, where we cross state lines within our 4-H program, we've actually been granted basically kind of a waiver. They know that we cross state lines, and so we don't have to get that federal. Now, if you were going to cross further, more than the boundaries that you are, then we would have to look at trying to get additional approval. So there are strict specifications for the graphic design. You cannot what's appropriate and inappropriate. There's a document on the website, and I believe Billy Sue has a copy of it now, or can get a copy of it now if anybody has any questions. But the green of the clover cannot be removed, or I mean, it cannot be changed. It can be green, white, black, or metallic gold, and so those are the only colors that you can use. And on the clover that I have on here, it's very, very small, but you have to have the 18 USC 707 little mark on the clover. And this one, like I said, you can't really see it, but it is along the bottom. The bottom leaf, you can see it is kind of right along the bottom leaf. So there are criminal penalties for the misuse of the 4-H clover. So under the 18 USC 707, and what that is Table 18 US Code 707. So that's the federal law. People engaging in the unauthorized or inappropriate use of the 4-H name and emblem are subject to criminal penalties, which include fines or imprisonment for up to 6 months. So what that means is if you cannot use the 4-H name and emblem for your own personal gain. So we had an example. I'll just share an example that I had come up. A couple of examples. This was when I was in another state. We had a baker come to us and ask for permission to use the 4-H clover when she was making cookies. She wanted to use it in cookies and then sell them in the store. And the state program leader in that state denied that request because she was using the 4-H emblem, name and emblem, for her own personal gain. Had she then, like a 4-H club came and sold those cookies and she didn't get a profit on them, then we would have granted, and then the program leader would have granted permission, but at that time it was not. Another example, when I was in another state as well, so we all know the market animal sale and it's all great. And we had a meat packing company that was had a great commercial on TV about how they support 4-H and FFA and come to their retail store and buy the animals that they have purchased from the market sale. And that actually got turned into USDA by another meatpacking plant because they were using the 4-H name and emblem for their own personal gain. Great that they support the program and, everything was good. Second, the other piece that hit home was it actually, because of the location of that county, the news, that station broadcast across state lines. And so it actually went across state lines and people were seeing it in other states, that ad in other states. So it was not they didn't get put in prison. They didn't have to pay a fine because they ceased that use. Had they not stopped, then they would have, it might have been pursued a little bit more. But they were very gracious. They didn't realize, the issues. So it's always best to check with your local extension personnel to ensure that the 4-H name and emblem is properly being used. If your club wants to make a t-shirt, or if you wanted, something like that, then always don't just go get them printed. You need to have those approved by the county office before you get those approved or get those printed, because I have caught several, and not meaning to, it was just, something pops up, especially, I see it a lot on Facebook where something pops up and I'm like, oh crap. And so I have to be the Clover police, and I don't like being the Clover police, but I also have a duty to protect that, protect the name and emblem. So always just take it take it to the office, take it to Billy Sue or take it to whoever's in your office and have them double check. If they don't know, then they will get a hold of me and they can send it to me really quick and we can, and I can give them a yes or no. And I've actually sent something to USDA because I had, I was kind of questioning whether it was legal or not either. And I took it to USDA and got the final yes or no answer. So it can usually happen within 3 or 4 days. So, okay, there's the assessment question. We're not going to talk about that. So within 4-H, we have what we call our 4-H mission mandates. These are federal mission mandates that are coming down from USDA in programs that we need to deliver. So those are in science. We all know that there's a big emphasis in STEM programming. We see it in our schools. We see it in most of our after-school programs, everything. So really, what we see with the STEM programs, and 4-H is no different. We have a huge focus on STEM. And, where we see that is, it's a place for our young people to transfer and translate their innovations. It's, there's a strong emphasis and there's a huge need across our country for STEM professionals and a scientifically literate society. And it doesn't have to be, I'm not saying that somebody has to get a PhD in some science area, in the Reno area, with Tesla coming in and with all of the different manufacturing companies, and we're getting so much more now. We're seeing a need for people with a basic knowledge of science and STEM, and so that's really becoming huge. So, it's important for 4-H to enhance, elevate, and expand our science-related programs and empower our youth to become those agents for change within the communities. One of the things that 4-H does have, 4-H Shooting Sports does have, is there are some STEM activities that can be done along with, because when you think about shooting sports, there's a lot of science involved in it when you think about the ballistics and et cetera. And so Colorado has done a really good job pulling together some STEM-based activities that you can do to enhance your 4-H programs, to go along with your 4-H programs. And kids love doing them because they get to do, like gross stuff, and they get to play with, stuff. Potentially, well, they can't blow up stuff, but they, and then the other one is healthy living. So really, since the inception in 1902, 4-H has addressed healthy food and nutrition. But, in light of the 21st century's health crisis, we need to ensure that our youth and our families learn how to make healthy decisions, not only related to the food that they prepare and eat, but also in the behaviors that they're engaged. And 4-H is pretty heavily involved in that area. And then the last one is civic engagement. So this provides the knowledge and the skills, the attitudes, and the motivation that gives youth the ability to look beyond strictly focusing on their own personal self-interest and being committed to the well-being of others. That's one of the reasons why we really emphasize the need for all of our clubs to do some kind of service to their community. What that looks like, we leave it up to the clubs, but something that they do to give back to their community. And I think that 4-H also helps young people to become informed citizens who are actively engaged in the community and the world. So really, it's important for us within the shooting sports program to look for ways to incorporate all 3 of these mission mandates into the program that we offer. You think about healthy living, and that's something that can very easily be tied into shooting sports. I know my own husband starts getting in shape he pretty much tries to stay in shape now for that 1 week in the fall when he goes after his animals. And so, we talk to young people about how it's important. Or the other one, my son is not a big kid. He's, weighs 40 pounds, or he doesn't weigh 40 pounds. He weighs 90 pounds now. And last year he really, really wanted to shoot his deer with his bow. And unfortunately he did not do the exercises he needed to do in order to pull back that 40-pound bow. And so, because last year he was only like 75 pounds. And so it is, that's critical. He had to do some healthy living activities, some weightlifting, etc. And he just didn't get it done. So he didn't get to shoot his deer with his bow. He got to shoot it with his muzzle loader instead. So that made him even happier. So with the roles and accountability, it's really, we need to foster success in our young people, and what that requires is that individuals have a working knowledge of the various roles within the organization and how each person effectively contributes to the program goals. And so we're going to be looking at a presentation that Dr. Jeff Goodwin put together, and Jeff has been around for a really long time. He was one of the national co-chairs one of the co-chairs for the National Shooting Sports Committee. He is now the state program leader in Hawaii, had been the state program leader in Colorado for a number of years. So I've kind of taken this and, adapted it a little bit. But so this is the organizational chart of 4-H shooting sports. So, most people are not a fan of I forgot that this one is, this one is auto. Pause. Okay. I'm going to pause it for just a second. So, I'm not a big fan of the top-down organizational structures, that classic pyramid. Here's your boss up here, and it fans out. But so, when we're talking about an organization such as 4-H, it really is, and business of working with people, we're not talking about an organizational chart, but we're talking about a living organism, or a tree, as you can see. So with this, the first part of it is, I'm going to go back, see if it'll let me go back. Nope. Okay, I need to unpause and I need to go back. Okay, so the first part of this is is what we're calling the 4-H Youth Development Program. This tree is the trunk of the tree, and that is really everything that is done in 4-H, including the 4-H shooting sports, passes through this trunk, because without that there'd be no uniformity or no consistency of the program from county to county, which is one of the things, if you've been around for a long time, you know that Nevada did not have leadership at the state level for for quite a while. And so I've been in this role I'm just getting ready to start my 4th year, and I feel like I kind of have a handle on what's happening around the state. So now we can start building some consistency around what's happening. And, that's, really important. If a state has 13 counties and no state 4-H office, then this tree would actually be 13 different tree trunks that all looked and functioned differently. So then the major branches of the tree are what represent the county offices. So these are, you can see these are not named by the, these do not have the county office names in Nevada, but those are, they're county offices. And then the minor branches, sorry, I'm going to take the leaves away. Okay, so those minor branches that we have represent the different 4-H clubs that make up the county 4-H program, because those are what provide the structure for the tree and the fullness of the tree. So the leaves on the trees represent the 4-H volunteers. Sorry, it's not letting me pause it quick enough. So the leaves on the tree are what, they're really what implement or are the volunteers. In a tree, the sun's energy is captured and then turned into usable energy in the leaves. So the tree cannot survive without the energy factories. So like the 4-H program, you know, the 4-H program cannot survive without the 4-H volunteers. So that's where the energy comes from that runs the 4-H program. Now, even though a tree cannot survive without its leaves, it can survive without with just a handful of those leaves. And you know, in fact, you know, trees need regular pruning, and that's a good management technique for both the tree and for people-related organizations. So when the 4 leaves hit the ground, did you see what happened? They were quickly replaced by new leaves. So just, you know, and when someone starts thinking that they're irreplaceable within the 4-H program, you know, then that's really an indication that we need to either find a new job for that person, or, you know, it could be time to replace them, because, you know, our 4-H volunteers are very, very important to us, but, you know, nobody is irreplaceable. So you know, and it's also, this is a really important concept within our program. In most states, the 4-H volunteers serve at the request of the Cooperative Extension Program. And so, you know, you can request to withdraw from the program at any time as a volunteer. And, you know, we know that happens. You know, you're not a leader for life. You know, we like to think sometimes that would be the case, but it's not the case. And so, you know, and we can also ask for, you know, we can also ask for a volunteer to step down. So, you know, really the bottom line that comes down to it is that if we have 4-H volunteers that are not working within the direction and the leadership of the county office or the state office in the implementation of that program, or if they don't play well in the sandbox with others, then that volunteer may be replaced. So the whole relationship between the leaf and the woody part of the tree is that relationship between the extension staff and the volunteer-based advisory committees and the volunteers. And so, you know, it's good to have it, and 99.9% of our counties have good representation and a good relationship. So what do we think it represents 4-H members? Fruit. So the fruit represents those 4-H members. And what we need to be concerned about is the fruit. So, you know, we as 4-H parents, as leaders, as extension staff need to be focused on that fruit. And then what do you think the roots represent in this organizational chart? Any ideas? No? What does it take for a program to function properly? What was that?
D, all the above.
Money? we really need money in order to function. So the roots represent the funding sources for the 4-H program. So federal, state, and county tax dollars, as well as fees, grants, gifts, and contracts are essential for the growth of the tree. Also, state and county level 4-H foundations are an important part of funding of the state and county 4-H programs. Another part of this is the 4-H National Shooting Sports Committee. They're also represented within the tree, or within the roots. And if anybody who's ever studied plant science or knows anything about plants, you know that the top growth of the plants is directly proportional to the root growth. And so the more funding directed to the 4-H shooting sports program, the more fruit that can be produced. And so, you know, we're always looking for new funding opportunities. Okay, and then there is, so one last assessment question. I'm not going to worry about that one. So any questions on the first module?
Nope.
Okay. Well, that's good. All right, I'm going to pull up, I just have to find the next module. Okay. Sorry, this is always a little bit of a challenging when you're trying to do this. Okay. So what I'm going to do is go through module 2, and then we'll take probably about a 10-minute break if that works for everybody. Module 2 will take just about 30 minutes probably. So, let's see. Okay. Okay, escape. Okay, it's not working. Just a sec. Okay, here we go. I grabbed the wrong screen. Okay, so module 2, this is an introduction to 4-H shooting sports. Can you raise your hand if this is the first time you're going through 4-H shooting sports, going through a 4-H shooting sports training? Okay, so there's a few new people to 4-H shooting sports. So this one, we're going to be talking about what are the goals and objectives of the 4-H shooting sports program, what is the 4-H shooting sports program, the national structure and guidance, the 4-H program and workshop fundamentals, and then what makes 4-H shooting sports unique. So one of the things to know about 4-H shooting sports is a little different than the rest of the 4-H programs. We do have, within the shooting sports, we do have a national committee that is made up of 4-H professionals from across the country that do pretty much kind of govern how the 4-H shooting sports program is run, both at the national and at the state levels, and then that trickles down to the county levels. The reason that they do that is because of we know that there's a greater risk with 4-H shooting sports, but what makes it so, because we have that structure in place, it is one of the things that one of the reasons why when you get insurance for 4-H, we can pay $1 a year for insurance, but high-risk activities such as the horse project, they have to pay $2 a year. But shooting sports, because there have been so few of accidents and the insurance company likes the way that the program is put together, that is why the shooting sports kids only pay $1. The same as somebody that's taking knitting or something like that. So the goal of the 4-H shooting sports program is to provide a high quality program that provides a positive youth development opportunity that engages youth in a safe, responsible use of firearms and archery equipment, and then in a variety of settings. It can be comprehensive education, lifelong recreation, and healthy competition. As we go through these modules, you're going to see a reoccurring theme often, and that's the ultimate goal of 4-H is to provide a positive youth development experience, and that positive development for for each and every child that's involved in our program. It's really essential that we keep that focus. It's carried through our 4-H meetings, through our practices, and other events that we conduct. So the national shooting sports objectives. The first one is to find and explore passions or interests. Just as a map or a GPS guides travelers along their way, these 10 objectives are going to help with that. So by igniting, with this first one, by igniting their spark within, then we enable the youth to explore their personal passions and interests in an organized and safe and supportive environment. The second one is engage in an effective 4-H program setting. So through their engagement in that 4-H program setting, youth are empowered to develop appropriate and positive relationships with adult mentors, with fellow youth members, and other peers. That's that one. And so they want to develop those. To explore a vast array of 4-H educational, recreation, and competitive competitive activities. And then to thrive in multiple settings. And to enhance the development and developmental and long-term outcomes. So we want them to, you know, just as we're looking at kids and, you know, we're helping them to celebrate their various successes that they achieve over time. You know, our ultimate goal is to enhance that development and those long-term outcomes for each child that will help them throughout their lives. So that's, you know, when we think about some of the things that we do within the 4-H program, you know, they're learning how to speak in front of people, and they're learning about, you know, the importance of serving in their, you know, serving their community. And those are things that we, you know, that we also want to strive and also build those lifelong love for the outdoors. So to practice and safe and responsible use of firearms and archery equipment, you know, to enhance shooting conservation and hunter education programs. So, you know, some people, and especially right now, we get a lot of questions about 4-H involvement, 4-H's involvement in shooting sports. And, you know, we have, in fact, right now, I get quite a few phone calls about why are we having shooting sports programs within the 4-H program. And, you know, what I come back to them is our number one priority within the 4-H shooting sports program is safety and responsibility. We want to teach our young people how to safely handle a firearm and how to handle it responsibly. And so, you know, so that there's significantly less accidents. When I go into the risk management module, I'm going to talk about the accidents and what, you know, why we have such a good reputation. You know, and we can also enhance the other shooting programs. So to explore the 4-H national 4-H mission mandates, you know, besides our young people gaining those skills in the discipline, you know, discipline specific, we really are encouraging our volunteers and our leaders to look at, you know, how can we engage in some of these mission mandate topics. So to model safety, sportsmanship, and ethical behavior. You know, there's that old adage that actions speak louder than words. And so it's important that our youth and adult participants always demonstrate the proper safety practices, ensure that their behaviors reflect desirable sportsmanship, and that they maintain 4-H's high standards of ethical behaviors. So, you know, it's really important to instill those in our young people. And then finally, the 10th one is to gain knowledge and to strengthen knowledge and life skills. So, you know, when instructors are well prepared for their meetings, so meaning that you go in and you look over the materials before you teach, that you would, you know, when you're well prepared for that and when you actively engage the young people in meaningful roles within the club, then that's when those young people get really excited to learn and acquire those life skills. So really the bottom line here is that our 4-H shooting sports program is dedicated to promoting safety, positive growth within the young people, and then building strong families, because all of us know that shooting sports is definitely probably one of our more family oriented activities that we have. So what is the 4-H shooting sports program? So it officially was founded in 1980 by Texas 4-H, and it is now one of the largest and fastest growing programs in 4-H programs in the United States. I can tell you in Nevada, it is one of our top 5 for project areas when you combine all of the disciplines together. And it is probably the program that I get the most requests about finding information out from parents. Probably at least once a week, I would say I get an email from a parent somewhere in the state wanting to know how they go about enrolling their their child in the 4-H shooting sports program. So that really, to me, speaks volumes for us. We've got a very strong program. Each year, there's approximately 500,000 youth that engage in this hands-on learning experience. For us, in Nevada, we have about 3,000 members that are in the 4-H shooting sports program. That's, again, across disciplines. So it's a wide variety. And it's really important that we remember that clover buds, those young people that are in Nevada are ages 5 to 8, are not eligible to participate in the 4-H shooting sports program at all. That is due to safety concerns, and so developmentally, it's not appropriate for them. So that is really critical for us to remember. And again, we can check. If you ever have any questions, go to the county office and ask those questions about age, etc. It's, helping guide our young people are over 20,000 authorized volunteer instructors. Now, within shooting sports, this is also what's unique, is we require the additional 15 hours of training, 12 to 15 hours of training to be able to lead a shooting sports program. This is the only project in the country that does that. So, and then it's administered, that oversight and that program direction is administered by a state 4-H program director. And then typically they will work with a 4-H shooting sports coordinator at the state level to look at goals and how they want to move the program. And then county extension personnel are responsible for the management of the 4-H program at the local level. And while 4-H strives to be inclusive to everybody, it's really important, especially with shooting sports, that we remember that that participating is a privilege, not a right. And if you have a young person within your 4-H program that is showing inappropriate, having inappropriate behaviors that put the safety and the well-being of others in jeopardy, then it's not permitted, and you can ask them to leave the program. That is, to me, that is very, very important that you remember that. So the National Shooting Sports Committee. So they have, it's such a wide array of audiences and opportunities that's one of the reasons why they pulled together a national committee. I can remember when I first started in 4-H, there wasn't any kind of organization around 4-H shooting sports. And when I'm trying to think, I'm not sure when they formed the national committee, honestly, but when I moved to Idaho in 2007, one of my major responsibilities in that state was the state shooting sports coordinator, and I do know that they had a national committee at that time. So they were put together to provide leadership and management for curriculum and training, for the image enhancement of the program, and then program oversight and continuity. So the members of that committee, there are state extension directors, there are state 4-H program leaders, there are 2 representatives from each region, and then there are technology and industry representatives. So there are representatives from Midway USA. I don't know if anybody, I'm guessing that probably if you're into any kind of shooting sports, you've probably ordered from Midway USA from the Potter Fields in Missouri. They are a big part of the National Shooting Sports Committee. They're also big donors to the National Shooting Sports Program. And then also we have representatives from federal. We have, I'm trying to think, the National Youth Shooting Sports Alliance. I think that's the name of the organization. So they try to get those industry reps as well. And then they are a nationally chartered organization, 4-H organization. Just as our clubs have to charter within the state program, we do have certain things at the national level that you have to go through a national chartering, and one of those things is some of our national committees. So the shooting sports provides nationally supported curriculum and instructor training, and so this is what you're going through now is the nationally supported curriculum. I believe you probably received your notebooks with your curriculum in it, and so you'll be going through that curriculum. Currently at this point there is not any national curriculum for youth. All of the curriculum is for the leaders. I know that in Nevada we do have some curriculum. Well, we have a book, a shooting sports book, and for the youth it's a leaders or a members manual, and it's got good information in it. So we're going to be looking at revising that. There is talk at the national level of trying to pull together some national youth curriculum as well. So the areas that they provide support for is archery, hunting and outdoor skills, muzzle loading, pistol, rifle, shotgun, and then a new one that is, or fairly new, is 4-H Western Heritage. And this is a program that really brings history to life. So youth in this program research the late 1800s frontier culture, and they develop a persona that includes a period appropriate attire, and that they make presentations, and then they shoot several courses that include steel targets using a pistol, rifle, and shotgun in time stages. And this is something we have not adopted in Nevada, but as we're moving forward and there's people that are interested in this program, there is an opportunity to go to one of the national trainings and to get nationally trained and nationally certified in 4-H Western Heritage. And so that is, again, something, and they do hold a separate contest and a separate event for that. So within the National Shooting Sports Committee, they have also adopted minimum standards that every state must follow. And what's critical about this is when we're talking about minimum standards, if there were an accident to happen in a county or a club program and it went to court, the court will look at these minimum standards and they will make sure that we are meeting these minimum standards. If there is proof that we were not following those, then we could be held liable. And so I'm not going through all of these right now because I will be going through them in the risk management module. But I wanted you to be aware, it's to ensure the personal safety and the program integrity is really why they put those together. And those are non-negotiable. I mean, it's just, there's nothing, I can't negotiate with them to say, oh, we don't want to do that. So the National Committee also encourages best practices. And so they've come up with a set of best practices that meet the needs to consider within the state 4-H program, and that they're applicable to most state laws. And so topics that are covered under those might include program eligibility, safety attire, ammunition, the storage, the proper procedures for inventory, storage, and transportation. One of the things that has been coming up in the last year is we've always kind of flown under the radar. The 4-H Shooting Sports program has flown under the radar of the university, the upper administration of the university, for a long time. And because of some things that have happened across the state, we are now we are now pretty actively involved with the university police department in the 4-H shooting sports program. And we do have some storage and some storage requirements. One of our new requirements that we're just trying to implement in phases is we do have to do an inventory of all firearms, both that clubs have and that counties have. And we have one person that is going around the state, and when he goes, he's going around to visit counties anyway. It's a person working in the director's office. When he goes to do that, he sets up time to go and do a physical inventory of those firearms. And that includes firearms, and, you know, it includes all guns, all all air guns, all archery equipment. He only has to do it once right now, and then every year we're going to be very strict about requiring that inventory. And it wasn't something, you know, that I was still trying to fly under the radar, but it didn't work. So if you do get a phone call that says, hey, you know, so-and-so's in town, Billy Sue will probably call and say, hey, so-and-so's in town, he needs to come check out come check out your inventory of firearms, how you're storing them as well. Don't be surprised, and please work with her. It's just, you know, if we want to keep the university happy, we've got to keep, we got to keep the university happy in order to have a program. So the other piece that they do is the training. And so there's 3 levels of training that are put together. So, you know, what you're going through right now is what we call a level 1 training. It is all instructors start at this level. It requires you to be currently screened and locally approved 4-H volunteers. Now, I do know, I think that there might be like within this where our fingerprints of, you know, they've been sent off and they might not have been returned. We're in that process, and we went ahead and let people go through training in that case, just because we don't know when we're going to be able to get another training out in Ely. So, you know, I went ahead and gave permission for people to go through that training, or to go through the training. You know, you have to be locally approved, and then go through the separate 12 to 15 hour state sponsored training for each discipline that you wish to teach. So if you're going through shotgun today, you can only teach shotgun. Now, next time we offer training and you go through pistol, then you could do pistol and shotgun. So, you know, your main responsibility is to lead that 4-H shooting sports program at the club and the county level. But you cannot train other adult instructors. You can also teach at camp or some of those settings. Then we have a level 2. So the level 1 instructors who have demonstrated a proficiency in teaching youth within that discipline at the local level can contact the state coordinator and then register to participate in a national training that is it's a 40-hour training, and it is typically held in different places. This coming year, it is in Iowa. I believe the fall, I don't think they have announced the site for the fall. They've switched it up, and they offer one in the spring and one in the fall, which to me is great. Because, you know, it's tough, and they try to rotate it in different regions of the country. I will tell you that in Nevada, we are putting in a bid to host the national training in the spring of 2019. And I've already talked to the national committee. I've talked to all 3 of the national co-chairs, and they are super excited for that training. What we've done is we're looking at the Clark County range, and so, you know, everybody's excited because they want to come and see, you know, because it's one of the top 5 ranges in the country. And so everybody wants to come down or wants to come out and see the range and experience it. So hopefully we will get, I don't think we'll have a problem with it, but who knows. So that would be an opportunity probably in May of 2019. If any of you going through this training, if you demonstrate that proficiency, then you would have that opportunity to go to that training. And it is a Monday through Friday training, a full 40 hours. So it does require people to take off work. That's the one thing that I have complained about, I guess, over the years, but I understand the reason why they do it. And then when you do become a level 2 trainer, so Rich and Tamara and Ron that are there this weekend, they are level 2 instructors. And so when you go through the level 2 training, it is you have to train at least one level 1 training annually for the next 3 years in order to remain, that's one of the requirements. And then you have to do at least one training every 3 years in order to keep that certification without having to go through more hoops. And so in a lot of states, and including in Nevada, our level 2 instructors are members of our state 4-H shooting sports advisory committee. So then we have a level 3 training. And so this is one that every year the national committee reviews outstanding level 2 instructors who have that, they really know their discipline and they understand, they have good teaching evaluations, they understand youth development, and they are then selected or they can then apply to assist in the teaching at the national training. So then the level 3 instructors teach at the level 2 training. And so those are, the first year they do an apprenticeship with a current leader, and then after they do that, then they can become a full level 3 instructor. And I don't believe we have any, in fact, I know we don't have any in Nevada, and I'm not sure who in the West are actually level 3, full level 3 instructors. Any questions about that? Okay. I'm going to briefly talk about state shooting sports committees. Now in Nevada, there is a formal state shooting sports committee. It has been inactive, and part of that was myself trying to get my feet wet, just trying to figure out what was going on. I talked to our instructors, and our volunteer coordinator often, but I am in the process of getting that committee back up and going. We did put out a call about, a month ago for applications. We just selected the members of it. What we've done, there are 4 adult volunteer representatives from the southern area, and there are 4 adult representatives from the northern area. Then there are 2 extension personnel that are from the south and 2 from the north, and then 2 teen leaders from the north and 2 from the south. And then our nationally certified instructors, so our level 2 instructors are part of that committee as well. And then in Nevada, we also have what we call a volunteer coordinator. So that is actually a volunteer that serves as a coordinator. And I work hand in hand with that person in order to get the trainings put together and to kind of guide the direction of the program. So their job, that committee is to assist the shooting sports coordinator. Typically, you can see, the committee composition. We try to have a variety of disciplines and experience on there, and then they work to advance state programming. And so some of the things that they do in Nevada is they help with the trainings. They also help, and we're going to be working on a system of selecting 3 or probably probably at least, I'm hoping maybe 2 or 3 sites in the fall and 2 or 3 sites in the spring to do training. Or right now it's very difficult because we only have a handful of level 2 trainers, and so we've got to work with them so they're not worn out. So it might be only 2 sites until we get more people that go through level 2 training. In each of those time frames, and we try to do them around the state so people don't always have to travel. They also assist with the state shoot, which is this year is September 29th in Las Vegas. And again, we try to rotate that around the state as well. And then, so why are level 1 trainings required? So, this is one question that we get all the time. We also get the question of, why aren't other organizational instructors approved? Why can't they just automatically become a certified 4-H volunteer? Like if they're a certified hunter education instructor, if they're a certified NRA instructor, or law enforcement officers. All the time. That's probably the biggest question. Well, one of the biggest questions that I get asked. And really, one of the ways to answer that, or one of the best ways to answer that, is to reverse that question. So why can't our 4-H shooting sports instructors automatically qualify to be hunter education instructors, or NRA instructors, or USAA instructors, or why can't they automatically be law enforcement officers? Really, what it comes down to is all of these organizations have a different criteria and a unique focus from or our 4-H program has a different criteria and a unique focus from many of the other shooting-based entities. And, our number one priority is positive youth development. We want to make sure that all of our programs are grounded in positive youth development. We're teaching adults to teach kids. We have those extensive youth development resources, and we're integrating STEM education into our programs, and then development of essential life skills. So, and first and foremost, safety. We say this a lot in our program, that, the shooting sports is the way we get the kids into the program. It's the carrot, or the, beef might be the carrot to get the kids into the program. But once they're there, our goal is to give them those life skills that they need to be in order to be successful. So, we're teaching them about responsibility. We're teaching them about decision making. We're teaching them about positive identity. A lot of those things. We're just using that project as the carrot. Our goal is not to have Olympic shooters. I mean, it would be awesome if we had Olympic shooters that came out of the Nevada 4-H program, but that's not our goal. Our goal is for the kids to have fun, to enjoy to enjoy the activity, and to hopefully give them the love for the program, the love for the sport, and so they'll continue it throughout their life. So it's also our state trainings give us an opportunity to clarify the roles, responsibilities, and expectations of each shooting sports instructor. So successful organizations recognize that achieving a clear and consistent understanding are crucial for the success of the program. And, within our land-grant universities, we've extended liability coverage to all of our 4-H volunteers through the that university has. And so we need to make sure that our volunteers are operating within the scope of your assigned duties. So within the job responsibilities of a 4-H shooting sports leader. So that's really, one of the reasons why we require the level 1 trainings. It's also, these are our personal protection that we've trained our volunteers in things that they can and can't do. So level 1, there are fundamental components within these trainings. First and foremost, and you're going to see this a lot with starting tomorrow when you talk about when you get into your discipline trainings, their number one priority is going to be safety and risk management. So you can see this Georgia example. They actually, in Georgia, their 4-H shooting sports program is called SAFE. It's shooting awareness, fun, and education. So, it's that safety is the foundation. And over the last 30 years, there's been over 150 billion person hours of educational contact by certified 4-H volunteers with the youth. In that time frame, I mean, think about the amount of time that is. In that time, there's only been a few injuries that have been documented within the program. Probably, and none of those have been fatal injuries within the program. And 4-H shooting sports remains one of the safest programs. It's safer than almost anything. We had an incident in when I was in another state where we had a young person that was he cut himself with a knife while carving a pumpkin and required massive surgeries. And so, that's one of those, and shooting sports in the 8 years, and this happened during the 8 years that I was there. In shooting sports in those 8 years, I did not have one injury that was reported to me. You're going to get little cuts and scrapes and stuff, but somebody's slapping their arm with the arm guard, with a bowstring or something, but nothing that requires hospitalization or surgeries. So, it's the fact that our, the stellar safety record is not by luck by any stretch. Each 4-H shooting sports instructor receives that in-depth safety training, and you are required to create a specific risk management plan that's tailored to the facility that you're using and in conjunction with with your meetings, and so with your equipment, etc. So that plan, now within the coming years, those plans will be required to be turned into the county office by a certain date, and then the county office has to share those with the state office by a certain date. And they need to be reviewed, though, by all of your program participants. You need to have your youth look at them, have your parents look at them. It's really important that everybody has an understanding of what happens in an actual emergency. One of the things that we talk about a lot is in an actual emergency, most people forget to actually think about a designated person to call 911. Because so often when that incident happens, we forget, and everybody thinks someone else is doing it. And so that's part of that risk management plan, is thinking about that. The other piece, first shot fundamentals. So this is one of those areas. The next 5 areas that I'm actually going to talk about are what make the 4-H shooting sports different than those other youth shooting programs. The first one, starting with this first shot fundamentals. So this has been a new thing, a new concept within the last 5 years, I believe. 4-H shooting sports trains instructors to teach the fundamentals such as the proper handling of the equipment, the muzzle control, and basic sighting, so that youth can safely take their first shot within 30 minutes of their first meeting. And so it's often that it's when they get that spark that ignites that lifelong love of shooting sports. The first time that they hit the target, or whatever it is, that is really what gets them so that they want to keep coming back. The next one is our 4-H volunteer training, our certifications. So nationwide, we have about 5,000 new 4-H volunteer shooting sports level 1 instructors that are trained and certified. that's a lot of, individuals. In Nevada, we have about 100 every year that we train in level 1 trainings, roughly. Depends on the year, but pretty much it's about 100 a year. And, several states, they're conducted in different ways, but, there are those, once you successfully complete that 12 to 15 hour training, then you can, then you're certified to teach those 4-H members. And, as we're trying to plan more trainings or look to those things, look for ways that you can maybe get trained in additional disciplines. And so that's one of the other things that makes it different. Whoops. The wrong button. The other one is we teach adults to teach young people. So it's an essential skill that's learned by the instructors at our state-sponsored 4-H shooting sports workshops that revolves around the effective techniques of teaching kids. It begins with the understanding of how youth learn, followed by how physical, emotional, and cognitive skills are different at different ages, impact the child's ability to learn. And, we're going to talk a lot about that in the next module. But that is something that we do focus on. And then the next one is developing life skills. Through active 4-H shooting sports involvement, youth are going to acquire many of these valuable skills. It includes communications, empathy, leadership, teamwork, decision-making, self-discipline, personal safety, and even record keeping. So these abilities really benefit our youth during their 4-H careers and throughout their adult lives. When you talk to 4-H alumni, think about, when you ask them, what do you remember about 4-H? 99% of them are not going to remember what they learned in their project. Now, so when you ask me, I'm going to remember that I got a red ribbon on my coconut macaroons at my first fair. Now that's just one of the things, but what I learned there is I learned gracious defeat, and I learned what I could do differently on my coconut macaroons the next year. But so we need to think about, what are those life skills? And, when we think about that too, research has shown that 4-H members are 4 times more likely to contribute back to their community than their non-4-H peers. And they're also twice as likely to make healthier choices and engage in STEM activities than their non-4-H friends. So clearly being in 4-H makes a difference. And the last one is positive youth development. This is really that bottom line of what happens within the 4-H program. It's the fuel that drives the gears and propels our program forward. It's really the more you learn about you will learn more about it in the next module. We'll talk a lot more about the positive youth development. So as we look at this, and we're winding down on this module, there are 3 final points that I want to review. So one of those is the program priority pyramid. So this is, as I talked about the top down, but this is a pyramid. So the first one is competition. Competition occupies that first portion of the pyramid, and sometimes is misconstrued by individuals as our primary objective. Now, in Nevada, I don't think it's necessarily as much. I mean, it's a piece of it, but as I look at, we get about 100 participants at the state shoot, between 100 and 125 participants at the state shooting sports match. And remember before I mentioned that we have 3,000 members that participate in 4-H shooting sports. So, it is a big part of some of them, but not everybody. And while competition can really be appropriate as part of a youth development program, it really comprises a small portion of the overall pyramid, as you can see. Just as a house requires a strong foundation and sturdy walls for the roof to add value, that's the way, the competition is the roof. So the next one, Whoops, I went the wrong way. Sorry. So the next one is recreation, and it represents a larger section of the pyramid. This is the hook that really keeps the youth coming back. If it's not fun, the youth are going to go somewhere else. Recreation is also what supports that concept of family involvement. It unites our parents and our youth around a common interest. And, you know, we know that families that play together stay together. And the last one is education. And so you can see this is really the foundation of what the 4-H shooting sports program is, the priority of the program is. So this is, while opportunities exist for positive youth development, acquisition of life skills at all 3 levels, you know, those priorities must be anchored in education. Without that focus, we can lose that support of our land-grant universities, and thus, you know, we can lose the entire 4-H program. That's one of the reasons why, you know, we are so strict on what you can, you know, what you should be doing and not doing. All right. So words have meaning. We're going to talk a little bit about terminology within the 4-H shooting sports program. So I want you to closely look at these 5 items. What do you think I mean, if you were to look at them, what would you call them as a group? Anybody?
Tools.
Okay, good. Great. So that was exactly, they are all tools. You know, each item can only change based on the intent of the person using them. So this is one of the things. We do not call anything that we use a weapon. So it is, you know, you know, if we intentionally use them to harm another person, that's when it becomes a weapon. And within 4-H, we are using them as a tool to learn our life skills and learn about safety and responsibility. So, you know, again, some people don't think that we should be teaching youth about firearms or archery equipment. They're concerned that if our youth learn how to use these tools, they could potentially misuse them. And, you know, that's where we have to, you know, we know that, I mean, very rarely is there an incident that happens where it is a former 4-H'er that has used one of these tools inappropriately. But if instructors or members refer to firearms as weapons, this really only reinforces the negative perception of the program. So we collectively need to eliminate the W word from the vocabulary. This is, you know, when working or discussing the 4-H shooting sports program with others. And I know that tends to be really difficult for former military or for law enforcement. And so, you know, if you go to the level 2 training, they have a jar, and every time you use the W word, you have to put in, you know, $1, I think it is. I don't remember, but it's, you know, trying to get it out of the vocabulary is really important. So, you know, each of those is a tool. Okay. So again, what makes us unique? So, you know, many organizations offer extensive subject matter or tactical training and certification. I mean, you know, 4-H, what makes 4-H shooting sports unique is we focus on the fundamentals of positive youth development. We are designing and creating a supportive environment and appropriate youth-adult partnerships where youth can develop those critical life skills. We want to incorporate those STEM activities, enabling youth to discover the why and the how related to shooting sports mechanics, you know, enhancing that educational experience. You know, one of the things, now granted, I won't let actually, I can't say that. So one of the things we've been dealing with a lot at my house is Nerf guns, and my son just thinks it's the coolest thing ever to take apart all of his Nerf guns and rebuild them. So, you know, you might put in a different spring so it shoots faster and shoots harder. And, or, you know, and then the other day he actually took his .22 rifle and he bought a kit to make it look tactical. I don't know. I stayed out of that one and let him and his dad do that. But, you know, how cool of the science to figure out how to do that. You know, and that's bringing in that STEM integration. And then certainly keeping in mind the 4-H motto of making the best better. You know, we want our youth to gain proficiency, but, you know, it's also that vital concept that we trust that all our 4-H instructors understand and model the positive youth development. So, you know, that we don't want to focus on making champion shooters. You know, we focus on making champion kids. I think that, you know, that to me is critical. You know, I love it when you watch a kid succeed for the first time. So any questions about this module? Okay. You guys, I really wish I was there in person. It would be a lot more lively, I promise. But do we want to take about a 10-minute break to get up and stretch?
Please.
Okay. All right. So we will take about a 10-minute break. I'm going to turn off my camera and put on mute, but I will be back at 7:40.
Does anybody else want another sandwich?
I'll fall asleep. I won't be sleeping with funny guy.
Then we can make a plan.
Colors.
Then share it. And I'll get the 2 tables.
No, really? Yeah, well, it's not. I've got this.
Just so we can get those all our
Just local people I got. Don got there at some point to start working.
Clearly not sure what the right to do something like that. We just gotta make sure we get back with Ron because we got to get out there, which is about 10 o'clock. My guys.
Good, by yourself. Yeah.
You got it.
Retired now?
Retired.
Yeah.
Wake up, wake up.
Oh, wow.
Little Susie.
Did you? Bored or what?
Yeah. Twice.
I talked to him today. I called him. He was parts for tracks.
I think
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So they live right next to each other.
so. Care about some shit. Yeah, I've got to run up there and we're gonna prop up the here.
So they'll come on.
Tables and unlock those things.
It's coming along. It's slow and steady. Trying to get everything set up. Yeah, yeah. We keep cleaning it.
You got 4 new. Yeah. Steps. Yeah, you're one of the students. Right. Oh, well. It's enjoyable.
Yeah, so we're like.
And I'm sure you know about that.
That's a while.
That's okay.
One of the days.
Nobody knows everything.
So I shot it, pulled it
I
out.
know the door. That's
Good. So, well, my next day, so I told her then you guys would.
Go for it. Get some sugar.
That's what you're saying now.
Sugar.
Oh, I'm sure there's. Oh, I'm sure. I was like, you can't do that. I'll just try to be done with this.
Everybody's okay with breakfast for tomorrow, right? I was gonna make this great. I know, I'm sorry, I just got enough.
Yeah, we don't have to guilt this maybe really want to draft you.
I know when I have to.
I mean,
Yeah, that's the one I wanted.
I was already trying to. Yes. I kept on saying, I think it's awesome. Really, what I should have done is traded with her, you know, I didn't take some time. Yeah. But this year, I'm hoping to have. So I'll have some Saturday, so we yeah, you gotta go. This year's gonna be better than we're gonna.
James, what are you doing?
Well, I was trying to learn stuff. Let's go. I worked in kitchens and stuff before, but
You're not right.
and so.
I should make you have gray hair, right? That's what happened to Mark. He's right there with gray hair.
So I could like use this 2 days this season. Yeah, so plus I didn't start till May. It doesn't, you know. It was a bit of a learning process. But this year we'll get have some just to like almost I got a shop license. The first one, but I marketed and he came up with the truck and stayed down. Oh, yeah, I chased it. Okay.
Honestly, it's you already did. You already have.
You guys have places mapped out.
So we've got a couple options. We've got a 9 Oh, yeah.
All right.
So what was that? Living and growing up period. Yeah. Sit down there. You're not into the mountain like you.
I just have to tell you guys, so one of the things that we don't allow within the 4-H shooting sports, and I think it's talked about in the risk management, is airsoft. And I just went downstairs and talked to my husband and son, and we've been cleaning out the garage. And they found about 5 or 6 years ago, I made the mistake of buying them tanks that shoot airsoft pellets. And they found them, and I just went downstairs, and my son's showing me his bruises from their war outside. They're remote controlled airsoft. So Rich and Tamara, I'm sure, I thought you guys would appreciate that one too. I don't know if they're still in the room or not, but
They're not.
They know my husband and son well enough. They probably understand what the battle that happens. So, but I was like, that's why we don't allow airsoft in 4-H. Too many injuries. I was like, who had their safety glasses on too? So, all right, we are going to talk about the third. So the next module is module 3. So I'm going to share, let's see. Oh, of course that one's not up. Okay. Whoops. Sorry, I'm trying to get it to. It does not want to like me today. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this one is creating and implementing a high quality program. And we're going to talk about the youth development portion of the training. So volunteers are important. They are an important part of what we do and how we do it. So there are, I mentioned before, there are 500,000 4-H volunteers that are certified within the 4-H, or actually just 4-H volunteers across the country that are sharing their passion and their generosity with young people. So they're doing that through positive youth development. And it's important to understand that 4-H is not simply an activity provider, but rather a youth development organization charged with providing research-based practices and philosophy. So as a 4-H volunteer, you are a volunteer educator of the land-grant university within Nevada. So what are we going to cover? We're going to cover what is positive youth development. We are going to cover creating a high quality program, elements of a quality program setting, solid teaching principles, strategies for effective teaching, ages and stages of youth development, and then the art of teaching. So let's begin with what is positive youth development and really defining that. So first, positive youth development is intentional. It doesn't happen by accident. We utilize research-based practices that help young people grow and thrive. Love it when that, okay. So we also use a pro-social approach. So we're of engagement for our youth in their communities. So we're organizing within schools and organizations, peer groups, and families. It's productive and constructive. You know, positive youth development is productive and constructive. The opportunities that we intentionally create for youth are developmentally beneficial, they're valuable, and they're practical. We remember the 4-H slogan of learn by doing. We focus on the youth's strengths. We believe that youth have the assets, and we're going to build upon those assets. We don't view the youth as if they're broken and that they need to be fixed, but we're gonna build upon the things that they are good at. I don't like this PowerPoint. Okay. It's also promoting positive outcomes for young people by first providing opportunities for them. We need to provide them opportunities to have positive outcomes. We're going to be fostering positive relationships. And finally, by providing the supports to build youth leadership skills. So remember I showed you the priority pyramid in the last module? Well, positive youth development is possible at all levels of this pyramid. You know, those 3 levels. The proportions of we know that the proportions of the pyramid are not accidental. The foundation of the pyramid, is education. And that should be in everything that we do. And that is that educational base that comes from the land-grant university. In your binder, your notebook that you have, that you got with your curriculum, that is educational and the foundation for the program. Recreation is also a really important component of that. And then competition is also a part of that. But it's not maybe the most important part. It's important to keep in mind that while the leader of your club, or you as the leader of your club, that positive youth development is possible among all of those levels. So we're looking at creating a high quality program. So this is a developmental context, and this is something that I don't even think Billy Sue has seen yet, but it's a model that's being looked at. Oregon has adopted this model, but think about how positive youth development works. So there's 4 sections. You can see the developmental context, the thriving trajectory, the developmental outcomes, and the long-term outcomes. So we're gonna, when you think about the developmental context, this is a piece of the model in which a volunteer has the most influence over. So that's the circle concept, where you see the youth program engagement, the developmental research, the PYD program, quality principles, and the youth sparks. This is really the part where great things happen within our program. If the developmental context is done right, then the thriving trajectory and the developmental outcomes will follow. So we're going to take a closer look at this developmental context. So within this, you can see that 4-H programs that are done well, this graph represents, the points of the developmental context of the Quality Youth Development Program. So think of that as the setting or the makeup of the 4-H club or program. So it's going to have 4 components. The opportunities for youth to find or foster their sparks, those things that this is it, this is the thing that I love to do. It's going to cultivate it's going to focus on building a sense of belonging for youth, so that program quality, we want our young people to feel like they belong. It's going to cultivate a developmental relationship with adults who are caring, that challenge their growth, that challenge them, and to share the power. And it's going to actively engage youth through sufficient dosage, intensity, and duration. Not every young person wants to meet every week or every, twice a week or whatever. They're going to, whatever they feel like their dosage is sufficient, that's where they're going to reach. Research shows that the intentional inclusion of these components of that developmental context in 4-H programs and or clubs set youth on a thriving trajectory that ultimately leads to both developmental and long-term outcomes that benefit the youth in the transition to adulthood. So there is more information about that, and I can, if anybody wants more information about that model, please feel free to give me, shoot me an email and I will send you the link. It's out of Oregon State though. But I think the key to understanding that is we need to find that young person's spark, what it is that brought them to the program and what it is that's keeping them in the program. For some people, that might be the competition piece. And so we need to, build upon that. So switching gears, we're going to talk about solid teaching principles and strategies. Enough about theory, enough about, models, etc. So, everybody develops their own teaching style. When they, and when they work with the 4-H program, you're going to develop your own teaching style. But what needs to happen is those strategies and those principles, you're going to teach differently, but the concepts and the strategies within the curriculum need to remain constant. This is the part of the research base of the land-grant university that we have. We've looked at, over time, everything has been developed and adopted techniques that we know are effective and safe within the teaching. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is this first shot fundamentals. This is specific to 4-H shooting sports, but really it can be applicable to any of our projects. It's a concept of that first shot fundamentals. We spoke about learn by doing in the previous slide. Without the experience or the knowledge acquired by doing a particular task, it's very hard to understand and comprehend what the educator is trying to teach. Within 4-H, we are very hands-on learning. Most of it's very kinesthetic and tactile learning. If you're not familiar with those terms, it's hands-on. They want to be out there doing. And so that's putting it, when you look at it in another way, it's really hard for a student who's never fired a pistol to understand the intricacies of the gun, the stance, the breath control, the sight picture, and the sight alignment. An example, my family went out shooting on last Saturday, and I was shooting a couple of guns that I had never shot before. And, they can show me how to do it, but it really took me just getting in there and doing it in order to figure out how it worked. So that's one of the reasons why, one of the ways that we can help students in the learning process is through this first shot fundamentals, is to practice that. So it's simply recognizing the value of getting youth into the line quickly and safely to fire successful first shots. As the youth has successfully fired that shot or two, they have a much better comprehension of what the firearm feels like in their hand, how it will behave once it's fired, and how it feels to try to align the sights or to control their breathing. So that's one of the big, the big changes I think that's happened to the 4-H shooting sports. And I think it's been really good. As long as we know that young people are going to remain safe, then we can get them through this part. So rules, policies, and procedures. As a leader, you're often called upon to act as an authority within the program. So it's really important that your knowledge of the 4-H club rules, the 4-H shooting sports rules, we have both state and national shooting sports rules, and the state rules are located on the Nevada 4-H website. There are also, the national minimum standards. You have a copy of those in your handout. They are in the next module as well. So, really having an understanding of 4-H policies and procedures is really important. Whether you're being asked by a youth member, a parent, or even the media, it's important that you know what those are and that you can give clear and concise answers. It's really important that you take the time to learn about your local 4-H program and your local 4-H rules, policies, and procedures. And it's okay if you don't know all the answers. I very rarely know all of the answers. It's, sometimes, and if you don't know, it's okay to say, I don't know, but here, let me go find the answer. And, that's really, it's not good to make up an answer if you were not sure. People really are pretty good about giving you time to find the right answer. And, it's going to be better if you answer it correctly than giving an inaccurate answer. So dress code, something to think about. Within Nevada, we do have a dress code for 4-H youth. As a leader, we need to adhere to that same dress code. Now, in Nevada, we do have formal dress attire. That is not for regular club meetings or, those are mostly for state, some of the other events, more formal events. But within the 4-H shooting sports program, we need to make sure that our young people are wearing closed-toed shoes. They should not, and they need to be wearing, the appropriate clothing. You can see even just both of these two clothing examples, what's appropriate and what's not. And as a leader, it's important that you follow the same. Behavior and sportsmanship. So it's easy, especially in the heart of competition, to forget the reason that we're involved in the 4-H program. As a parent of a child that plays sports, I'll be real honest with you. I'm not competitive when it comes to my own self, but I'm very competitive when it comes to my child. And so, sometimes it's tough. And I have to remind myself, all the time about this. But we want our 4-H youth to perform well and to be successful. But, successful outcomes in the program are often much more than just winning. And it's if they model good behavior, if they have good sportsmanship, and if they can compose themselves in a positive manner in the face of disappointment, or, to me, that's important. We always laugh because my son went to the state shooting sports competition this year for the first time, and he did not do well. I said he did not get last place, but he was in the bottom 5. But I looked at him and I said, you know what? Oh, well, did you have a good time? Did you have fun? Did you learn something? And he's going, I had a great time. It was so much fun. And I thought that is exactly the answer that I wanted to get from him. And so, it didn't matter that he didn't do well. So he had a good time and he learned some things, and he knows, he learned what he can do differently next year or this year. So, and we need to also remember our youth learn behaviors and traits from the people that they look up to and that they aspire to be like. So as a 4-H volunteer, it's really important. You're probably one of those people. And so we've got to remember that we have people watching us and that we need to always model that good behavior and emphasize that good sportsmanship. During club meetings, encouraging kids to cheer each other on and do those types of things. I think that's always really important. Hands-on technique. From the beginning, 4-H has recognized the benefits of hands-on or experiential learning. That's learning that happens in the field and not necessarily in the classroom. And it exemplifies real-life situations and experiences. The 4-H slogan is "Learn by doing," and 4-H educators value and adhere to that practice whenever possible. And you as a 4-H volunteer should be adhering and valuing that practice. So education takes place in real-life situations. Education that takes place in real-life situations has a huge impact on young people, but it also comes with some inherent risk. I mean, as we all know, managing that risk, as we're going to learn about in the next module, is really important. One of the ways that we can help manage risk is by working with youth in using appropriate hands-on techniques. So some of the things that we have to do within the shooting sports program is, sometimes in real life situations, we have to either touch or reposition youth. And so it's, just as it's really hard to flip a lamb for shearing without somebody helping you to position yourself correctly to use that leverage of your body, the same is true in shooting sports. And so a couple of things to remember with the hands-on technique is always explain to the entire group what hands-on technique is and how you will reposition a youth if necessary. And then you should always, before touching a young person, ask that youth and the parent, if they're present and close by, if it's okay with them touching, if they're okay with you touching them, to reposition. And prior to touching the youth, you should announce in a loud enough voice that the youth next to them can hear, "I'm going to touch you to move you into the proper position," and then ask for permission. Is that okay with you? And always touch the youth with an open hand. You always want to make sure your hand is open, or the back of your hand if possible. Avoid grabbing or clutching or gripping the young person. Sometimes, I know sometimes you have to grab their shoulders and either push them down or move them or but make sure, if, when all possible, try to use an open hand. And use of these simple steps is going to help reduce confusion and suspicion of the adults. And I'm sure that Tamara and Rich and Ron will show you that tomorrow when they have to reposition you as the going through the training. They'll show you that technique. So teaching for early success, an important part of being an educator, and as volunteers, you are educators within the 4-H program, is teaching for early success. So quality education allows that student to feel successful with their new knowledge and their skills that they're getting, and use those with confidence as a building block to achieve those more increasingly difficult goals. So recognizing and rewarding early successes allows that's how the young person gains that confidence that they need to master those skills. Oops. Modeling behaviors. So, 4-H members, like any youth, are like sponges, and they soak up all of the ways that the adults behave and they dress and they talk and they act. And as a 4-H leader, you are the role models for those young people. What is said and what is done, the actions, and even the things that are posted on social media sites will be modeled by youth. And so, 4-H instructors need to remember that we always should be professional in our actions and interactions with our 4-H members and be at that positive influence. One of the things that we forget about sometimes is even social media. And, while we may not be friends with our 4-H youth or even our families on social media, they may be still out there looking, and they may still be seen. And so it's really important to remember that. It's really important that we give concise step-by-step instruction just when they need to know it. It's by having that we can have, we can then share with the young people. They're going to have an easier time. So often that as 4-H volunteers, we are very passionate about the subject that we teach. We find that especially within the shooting sports program. Everybody that's involved in shooting sports is very, very passionate about what they're teaching, and and oftentimes there's such a huge wealth of knowledge within that subject. And so sometimes we forget that we can overwhelm a young person in the amount of information that we're trying to give to them. So try to practice those concise step-by-step instructions and don't give them more than they need to know at that time. Give them also time to understand, to learn, and to practice those steps before you move on to the more difficult topics. I've mentioned learn by doing a couple of times, or experiential learning a couple of times. So, this has long been the process of 4-H. I don't know how many of you have ever seen this model or heard the terms do, reflect, apply. Within 4-H, so often we spend all of our time doing, and we forget to reflect on what we did, and we forget to apply what we did. And so that's one of the, it's really important. It's really pretty simple. You start with a hands-on activity, and you do the activity, and then you get the kids together and you reflect upon what they did. So you're going to ask them questions like, so what did you learn? What could you do differently maybe next time in something that they might not have been as successful in? And then they apply with their learning to a real life situation. So let's put it in a context that we can understand a little bit. So we're teaching kids about sight alignment. So we could stand in front of them and lecture to them about how they properly align the sights of a firearm. Or we can use the experiential learning process. If we use that process, we're going to conduct a hands-on activity. So maybe having teams make large front and rear sights out of cardboard and then demonstrate how to properly align them up and down, left and right. This is the do part. Once a youth have mastered aligning the sights, then we reflect on what we learned or why it is important. If your sights aren't properly aligned, you can't consistently align this, or you can't consistently align those sights. You're never going to hit the same place twice except by accident. Then we're going to apply that learning to doing an exercise like triangulation exercise that you're going to find in your 4-H manual. That's in the pistol and the rifle curriculum. So those of you taking shotgun, go borrow the rifle and pistol curriculum and look at that triangulation activity. So the do, reflect, and then apply will create that circle of mutually reinforcing activities that are going to help the 4-H member to retain and perform the required steps to be successful. So you can see, so they do have technically 5 steps, but what we really talk about within 4-H is that do, reflect, and apply. Any questions on experiential learning? Okay. So now we're going to talk about ages and stages of youth development. So really, to be an effective teacher, it's critical that you understand the ages and stages of youth. You're not going to be successful if you're asking youth to do things that they aren't capable of doing or they don't want to do. So there is, so many times we forget that things are not developmentally appropriate for a young person to be doing. So we're going to talk about early childhood, the ages 5 to 8. This is what we call clover buds. So at this age, children are really learning to master their physical ability by learning large muscle groups for running, jumping, climbing. They're just beginning to start developing those fine motor skills like tying their shoes. You know, we all know the kindergartner, they get so excited the first time they can figure out how to tie their shoes. And so really when you're working with this age group in relationship to their physical development, you need to focus on activities that encourage the use of those fine motor skills those large motor skills rather than those fine motor skills. So, an example that I've used with this age group, one of the things that I've done, I used to teach clover buds about horses. And, we couldn't use a horse, live horses with them. And so this was when I was in Idaho. And so what we would do is, I had all kinds of activities to teach them about the breeds, and I taught them about the colors, and I taught them, and I had hands-on activities for them to do where I had model horses. But I was trying to teach them about what a walk, a jog, and a lope was. And so one of the things that we did was trying to build those large motor skills. So we had them bring stick horses, and I taught them how to do those activities using a stick horse. And, it was great because it got them out running, and it was improving those large motor skills because they were running. Socially, these kids are learning to develop relationships, and they might have, at this point, they're going to have several best friends. They can fight with each other, but, they get over the fights fairly quickly. It's not girl drama. It's just kind of, they may fight and they're done. Emotionally, at this age, they're very focused on themselves. Everything is about me, me, me. And they have a really hard time understanding anybody else's point of view. Intellectually, they really they base their thoughts on concrete ideas. They cannot get abstract ideas at this point. So, needless to say, for a variety of reasons that, within the development was developmentally appropriate, we don't allow this age group to participate in the 4-H shooting sports program. So the middle childhood, which is 9 to 11 years old. At this age group, they're very, very active. I'm sure all of you have seen this. They cannot sit still. They cannot, for long periods of time. The girls at this age are maturing faster than the boys. By this age, they're actually some of the girls are probably starting to go through puberty. And so active learning experiences are really essential at this age group. Socially, the children in this age group want to stay with their own sex, the boys with the boys and the girls with the girls. And if you ever notice when you're at a shooting sports, at a club meeting, you're going to have the girls on one end and the boys on the other. Very rarely are you going to have them intermingled unless one girl shows up and then all the rest are boys. So that girl may be in there, but if more girls show up, there's no room in there. But essentially, it's at this age that boys have cooties and they're really gross, and we don't want to talk to them. Ew. So emotionally, they may want to be they want everything to be fair and equal. So they don't judge things in absolutes. There's very little middle ground. The idea is either wonderful or it's disgusting. So, and then if you look at them intellectually, this group is easily motivated and they're eager to try new things. However, they may lose interest very quickly. So this is one of those things, if you have a club that has a variety of if they have this age group and you're doing a variety of shooting sports disciplines, you may, they're all going to want to try everything. So don't spend a lot of time on each, you might want to spend less time on each one so that they get to try all of them. Simple, short lessons are important, and then keeping the learning experiences brief. So, and providing that variety. So let's look at 12 to 14-year-olds. This is the age group that I'm dealing with right now at my house. And boy, it's super fun. Let me tell you. I'm not enjoying a 13-year-old child right now. He may have to go live with grandma until he's nice again, but no, he's a good kid. But children at this age, they're going through a lot of physical changes. They're starting to enter puberty. The boys' voices are starting to change, and they're experiencing growth spurts. We figured out my son had grown almost 2 inches from December to February. It was crazy, it was like this huge growth spurt right there. They're starting to now overtake the girls in stature. If you look at class pictures, a lot of times the boys are in the front and the girls are in the back because they're taller when they're younger. And then as that, it changes, they start moving into this. They're starting to be both boys and girls are concerned about their body image. As you work with this age group, you need to be sensitive to those feelings and avoid comments that criticize or compare the youth physically. You want to watch them. You want to watch the youth so that they're not making fun of each other. And if they do, make sure you put a stop to that so that there aren't any hurt feelings. Socially, at this age group, they prefer activities that include both boys and girls. They're more interested in what their peers say than what their parents have to say. We've all been through that. They're becoming more opinionated and more independent, and they tend to reject solutions from adults because they feel like their solutions are better. So just an example. Right before spring break, a couple of weeks ago, my son had to do a paper on some kind of, I don't even know what the topic was, but it was some kind of controversial issue. And he picked, of course, gun control, because it was right after the walkouts of the school and everything. And he wrote his paper on gun control, and it was okay. It looked like a 13-year-old had written it. So his dad and I sat down with it, and we were, I was doing my editing and going over, and man, he was crabby about all of the suggestions that we made. And it was like, so it's that he did not like the suggestions that we made. He was, but very opinionated. His very liberal teacher loves that he's very conservative. It's just kind of a funny mix, but you can just I can see that piece in my child at this age. So he's very developmentally appropriate is what I tell people. I'm like, it's very developmentally appropriate. So, at this age, they tend to compare themselves to others. Sometimes we characterize this age group as the drama queen or the drama king. Their emotions are all over the place. 1 minute they're happy and they're having a great time. The next minute the world is against them. Have we all seen that? We all know what that's like. This is really where it's important not to be careful not to embarrass or criticize those kids. We need to help them with exploring their identity, their values, their beliefs by providing them activities that are going to challenge their thinking. I think that's really critical. And then, letting these early teens assume some of the responsibilities for planning events and activities is really a good thing. And setting expectations that they follow through with their duties. The intellectual development at this age group is expanding because it's including more abstract thinking. They're beginning to understand the cause and effect, and that they're ready to do more in-depth long-term experiences. So as we start working with this age group, it's really important, if you're looking at their intellectual development, that we begin to give them real-life problems to solve. We need to let them make decisions and evaluate those results. so that we can learn, so that they can learn from those mistakes and celebrate the achievements. We always say that 4-H is a very safe place to fail. And, you know, young people need to learn how to fail, and 4-H is a great place for that to happen. So it's also, you know, at this age group, this is where they thrive with those service learning projects, and that they can help identify some of those needs and plan together to address those. And then teens. So this is kind of that 15 to 18. I always laugh and say sometimes you'll see similarities in the 5 to 8-year-old group and the teenage group. You know, sometimes they're very similar, but there are differences. So with this group, they're approaching maturity with their physical development. You know, they're pretty much, a lot of them have already gone through puberty by this age. They're concerned a lot about their body image. This is where acne and weight and physical activities and issues become a concern to them. They're very impressionable with their physical appearance, and they can easily be misguided by advertising and that emphasis on that society places on physical appearance. When working with this age group, it's important to avoid comments that criticize their appearance or implying that their physical appearance is related to who they are on the inside and their success and failures, and also their happiness. Socially, they desire status among their peer groups. Although they want to be part of a group, they're also starting to recognize themselves as individuals. They're interested in co-educational activities and dating. So this is, you know, they want to be in groups of male and female. They're learning how to make commitments and follow through. And we need to encourage that social development by involving them in the planning of their own programs and holding them accountable for the success or failure of their plans. And we can also emphasize the personal development and the leadership skills in the teens. Emotionally, their characteristics center around respect, developing confidence, and developing independence. They're looking for ways to express their uniqueness, but still want that approval from their peers. They're also starting to develop their own set of values and their beliefs. As teens mature, we can, as volunteers and as staff, we can encourage their emotional development by letting them assume more responsibility. Continue to challenge their thinking on identity, values, and beliefs, and encourage them to work in youth-adult partnerships to achieve those common goals. Some intellectual characteristics of this age group include mastery of abstract thinking and their ability to imagine how their behavior can impact the future. They like to show others what they have learned. This age group doesn't do well with meaningless activities or things that just take up time. You know, this is where they start questioning, when am I ever going to use algebra, or when am I ever going to use some of these activities? They don't want meaningless activities. So if we want to keep our teens engaged, we have to provide them with real life problems to solve. And this is, you know, it's really important with this age group that we give them opportunities for career exploration, because this is where they're starting to think about where they want to go to college and what career they want to pursue. Okay, any questions about the developmental stages? Okay. It's always a good time with with age groups, trying to figure out, is that really appropriate for them to be doing? So the Art of Teaching, this is a publication that was put together a while ago, and it is on, if you go to the National 4-H Shooting Sports website, it is on that website for our instructors to look at. Really, it's a compilation of simple, time-tested strategies that are easy to understand and employ in the daily activities with our 4-H youth. Each one of these comes with a representative picture to help those visual learners. As I said, everybody has their own teaching styles. We also have our own learning styles. So to help you better learn or to better remember that. So to start with, the ABCs of teaching, the ability to balance it, the ability in balance with challenge. It's important for us to balance our youth's ability with the amount of challenge that you give them. The groundwork for this strategy is the zone of proximal development. So let's look at this. So this uses, and I can't pronounce it's Lev Something-ski. It's the person who created this. I have no idea how to pronounce it. It's like Vygotsky. But this person, he used a visual representation to show the zone of proximal zone of learning. So this graph shows that relationship between challenge and ability. And if balanced, the youth stays within that zone of learning. However, if that balance is not correct, then the youth struggles. If a child has a lot of ability but not enough challenge, they're going to consider your club boring. I mean, how many of you guys have seen that? I've seen it, you know, especially, you know, we see it in school when our own children are not challenged in school, they become bored and they don't like it. Coincidentally, if a child is challenged too much, and they don't have the ability to meet that challenge, they're going to find it boring as well because they're going to be struggling. So if you keep it balanced, just the right amount of challenge to meet their abilities, you have engagement in the program. This model works like this. We start with a child who is capable of handling only a small challenge with their low ability level. They are in the lower left quadrant of the model. To move this youngster through the zone of learning to the higher level of knowledge and capabilities, you must challenge them just a bit, just enough to make them slightly uncomfortable. And then you let them practice until they improve their skill and are back in their comfort zone. That's that zone of learning. Then you let them experience a higher challenge and then let their ability catch back up. So you repeat that sequence over and over and over until you have ratcheted them up to have the ability to handle all challenging situations. So you can see that result looks like a staircase with small successes that put that child in that thriving trajectory. So make them moving towards long-term outcomes and give them that ability to handle increasingly challenging situations. So TSI. Anybody know what that stands for? I don't want to hear the bad guess. No. So that stands for tell me, show me, involve me. So this concept really goes back to the root of the 4-H program and the premise of this: the youth learn best when activities are engaged or when they're actively engaged in the learning process. The 4-H slogan again: learn by doing. The doing part is important. TSI, learn by doing, and experiential learning are all different ways of saying the same thing. So think about it. TSI, so tell me, show me, involve me, is, and then learn by doing and experiential learning are all the same thing. So everybody remembers being taught. Rote learning by an instructor that seemed to just like to hear himself talk. That's why I have such a hard time with this method, because I don't really like, you know, I'm an interaction person. I like to interact with people, and so this is tough, you know, that's why I keep stopping and asking questions, but I don't like to hear myself talk. But this is a poor practice, and it's generally very ineffective with youth. So you just, if you just tell me how to do it, I'm probably going to forget how to do it. being shown how to do something is a little better. At least, there's something for the visual learners to see, and kids can usually better understand those concepts of being taught. However, youth are usually very anxious to try things themselves. If you're showing them but not letting them try, you're going to lose them quickly. So show me and I might learn better. So the last one, involve me. Involvement or engagement is really where the good learning takes place. Try to develop lessons, and in your curriculum, your lessons do have hands-on learning activities. That is, our 4-H curriculum. That's what the main components of our 4-H curriculum is. It needs to include a hands-on learning activity. But as you're trying to create some supplemental activities for your club, then you need to think about, making sure that those include active participant for the 4-H youth whenever possible. You can follow that up with the reflections of what they learned and the chances of doing it again to improve their skills. The do, reflect, apply completes the experiential learning process. So involve me is how it works. Then I'm going to involve me in how it works. Then I'll understand, and I'm probably never going to forget. Through this graphic, we express the need of leaders to focus on the kids. The kids are your audience, and should be your priority. It's easy for adult leaders to forget that kids have much less life experience, and you can talk easily beyond their comprehension. So each year, Beloit College in Wisconsin compiles a list for their faculty to gain a sense of understanding of the mindset for the incoming freshman class. So examples of this year's college, or of some of those things that to make sure that you're teaching properly. So I want you to think about this. They have no idea that Americans have ever been held hostage in Iran. They think that bottle caps have always been screw off. They have no idea what sounding like a broken record means. They don't know that voicemail replaced the answering machine, and before that, there was nothing. Most of them have no idea of life before this. They don't even know what a flip phone is. I mean, to give them a flip phone, a flip cell phone, they're like, I don't even know how to use this. And then to really mess with their minds, put a rotary phone in front of them that's hooked up to a landline. They don't understand it at all. My poor son's like, how do you do this? So, but think about that. Jimmy Fallon has always been the host of the Tonight Show for this age group. They have no idea who Johnny Carson is, let alone Jay Leno. They think that popcorn can only be made in the microwave. They don't know, okay, so this one, they don't know who Mork is, and they don't know where he came from. They've never heard, where's the beef? I'll walk a mile for a camel, or de plane, boss, de plane. They can't imagine not having a remote control for the television. Their lifetime has always included AIDS, and there's always been MTV in their lives. The one from this year that probably got me the most, I was reading over the list for the incoming freshmen from this year. This is the last class of millennials. After this year, so next year's class of college freshmen are going to be what they call Generation Z. Think about that. So many times, and I know at least in my own career, in fact, I was just looking and I had a thing about working with millennials and, how do we work with millennials? And I'm thinking that ship has sailed now. We need to start doing workshops on working with Gen Z youth now. And so that was crazy to me because, it still feels like the millennials should be little kids. So the other thing is thinking about the mindset of a 9-year-old. Okay, so have you ever thought about the mindset of a 9-year-old? Here's some things that young people have said. So this is what they feel that they've learned in life. I've learned that if you spread peas out on your plate, it looks like you ate more. That came from a 6-year-old. I've learned that you should never jump out of a second-story window using a sheet for a parachute. That's a 10-year-old. I've learned that you shouldn't confuse a black crayon with a Tootsie Roll. 10-year-old. I'm not sure what 10-year-old would do that, but hey, it could happen. I've learned that when you have 3 of your wild friends in the car, the driver freaks. 9-year-old. I've learned that you can't hide a piece of broccoli in a glass of milk. 7-year-old. I've learned that when you wave at people in the country, they stop what they're doing and wave back. That's a 9-year-old. I've learned that when you laugh and drink soda pop at the same time, it comes out your nose. From a 7-year-old. I've learned that goldfish don't like Jell-O. That's a 5-year-old. And I've learned that girls sweat just as much as boys. That was from an 11-year-old. So, so focus on the kids. Think like a kid. The best thing ever is to have, to take a ride with a bunch of whatever age group, with a bunch of kids in the car and just listen to their conversations. It's hilarious. It's important, that we teach to our audience and not above them and realize that our program is all about the youth. The next one is TM. So what do you think the letters TM stand for regarding the topic of teaching kids?
Carrie, just an FYI, my battery's low and my plug-in's at my house.
Oh, okay. Okay, so if I get disconnected, what I'm going to do is I will record this session. I will record the risk management session and send it to everybody. So even though that's the one. So Rich and Tamara and Ron, you'll be needing to talk a lot about safety, but I will get that.
But I will make sure and tell them.
Okay. So what TM stands for is teachable moment. Sometimes we think it's trademark or time management or even transcendental meditation. That's a good word, isn't it? So the trademark of an effective educator is the ability to devise and utilize teachable moments. So to set up a teachable moment, it's actually kind of like setting up a trap and then springing that trap at the opportune moment. When the trap is ready to be sprung, the student knows that they've been had, or in the case of education, they know what the point is that's being made. So educators we must make an effort to both set the trap and spring it right at the right moment. So that teachable moment doesn't happen, often. We must be intentional sometimes about planning and setting those educational traps. Sometimes the more you teach, the more you're going to find consistent places to set those traps for maximized results. So an example of creating a teachable moment is the manner in which the information in the presentation is being presented. So I'll bet many of you noticed that the picture included a capital D and a pair of shorts. That is an educational trap. In fact, the images are like small traps. They're going to keep you interested in learning what it means. Because I took the time to set the trap, and that was, if you look at, I don't know which one it is. Never mind. because I took time to set the traps, I know that you are paying attention, and that we're going to, and that we'll get to that slide in just a couple of moments. No mistakes. So this double negative is a reminder that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay for us as adults to make mistakes and to allow kids to make mistakes as long as they're in a safe and controlled environment. If teaching someone to operate a chainsaw, it's best not to let them screw up too bad, right? We don't want to just hand a kid a chainsaw and not give them any safety tips. And that's true, those lifelong lessons that stick out with youth are those in which the young people have learned from their mistakes. Many times adults want to rescue kids from adversity. And when that's done, then the young people are robbed of that power of that learning experience. It's okay for them to make mistakes. And, like I said before, 4-H is a good place for us to fail, a safe place to fail. So leave them on a high point. Many times educators tend to pull out their best educational tricks at the start of the class. If your best trick is used in the first 10 minutes of the activity and the last 50 minutes are boring, what do you think the kids are going to remember on their way home? They're going to remember boring. So of course, we want to make sure that we have fun activities all the way through. You want to conclude with the activity that's your best trick. So that's what will be remembered, and that's what they'll talk about the whole way home. Leave them on a high point with your best trick and have them come back for more at the next event. And, a lot of times maybe then they'll bring a friend with them. It's also important to recognize when a kid is in a good place, when the kids are in a good place to quit for the day. If you have a young person that's struggling to hit the target, don't let them fail and send them home defeated. Set the stage for success. Maybe that means moving the target closer or making the target bigger. Do that. The minute they hit that target, congratulate them and call it quits. Make sure that they have that success to take home and remember. So what does debrief have to do with teaching kids? Educators so many times do a tremendous job of educating, but then fail to stop and discuss what just happened, and then drive home their educational message in a good debriefing session. So it's a second step in the experiential learning process. Remember, do, reflect, apply. So many times the plan is set and sprung, and the educational trap, that we set and spring the educational trap successfully, and then we let the kids wander off without going through that explanation of what just happened or why it's important. A good debriefing session cements the educational event in the minds of the students so that they will never forget. The next one is fun. Quality educational experiences for youth must incorporate fun. Educational experiences that don't incorporate fun are not as effective as they could have been. And if your educational event isn't fun, you're going to find yourself teaching no one at your next scheduled event. Kids just want to have fun. SPE. Okay, so now we've reached a part of the program where we generously offer one crisp, clean $100 bill to anybody who can guess, who has not previously seen this presentation or may have been privy to this slide, to the meaning of the acronym SPE. Anybody have any guesses? Nope. So what do you think the E stands for? Maybe education. So, okay, so this is a little academic, but just follow me. So Dr. Ron Howard, who's one of the godfathers of the National 4-H Shooting Sports Program, says it like this: Very few young people are interested in a program overtly focused on coping competencies and contribution skills. The concept of life skill development is neither attractive nor exciting. As a result, these elements are embedded in hands-on experiential learning in subject matter that is fun. Leaders and coaches must understand their roles in teaching life skills, but they also must carefully coat the medicine of life skills education with the easily swallowed activity of shooting and related interests. Okay, so this is your last chance. Any more guesses? Okay, so we're going to do it this way. The S stands for sneaky. We aren't teaching life skills overtly. We have to carefully coat the medicine of life skills with the easily swallowed activity of shooting sports. We can do it covertly so that the kids don't really know that they're learning how to transition into adulthood more easily. The P stands for prophylactic. Before you snicker too hard, let's consider that word. The root of the English word prophylactic comes from the Greek word prophylaktikos, which means preventative or protective. Anyone here in the medical field? They will confirm this to be true. Therefore, SPE stands for Sneaky Prophylactic Education, which really means preventative or protective education delivered in a covert manner. Let's put it another way. If we take a 9-year-old youngster and let them run the streets with no proper adult supervision until they're 18 years old, what are the odds of that young person growing up to be a contributing member of society? Not good. If we take that same young person and put them in a positive peer groups with a caring adult for guidance, and we teach them the life skills that they will need to thrive into adulthood, what are the odds that they will become a contributing member of society? Much better. That's where the preventative part is that we do in 4-H. If we have fun with that young person for those 9 years, they don't even realize what's happening. That's the sneaky part. Okay, so how'd you do on your guesses? Good job. Okay, because the 4-H thriving model is new, many of you are probably wondering about the whereabouts of essential elements. Some of you may have learned about essential elements or targeting life skills. You know, you need to understand that yes, they are still there. They are still very important. So many of our experienced leaders may recognize the opportunities for belonging, which is really that emphasis on program quality, as one of the essential elements of the positive youth development. It's critically important to that we create a space for belonging, for mastery, for independence and generosity in a 4-H program. Likewise, youth are in a well-run program that consistently honors the skills that are found in the targeting life skills model are gaining 21st century learning skills. So they really are there. Okay, does anybody have any questions related to, or if you have any questions related to the youth development model or youth development module, please let me know. And now I'm going to move on to the last module, which is not up. Let me pull it up really quick. And this one is the risk management. More affectionately known as covering your assets. This is the final module in this series. So the main topics of this module are the risk assessment of mixing kids and guns, the review of the National 4-H Shooting Sports Minimum Standards, the review of state-level best practices, a look at how to put together a good risk management plan, and understanding the 4-H shooting sports risk management model. As incidences such as school or public shootings hit the news, and as federal and state legislation pose possible unintended negative consequences for the 4-H shooting sports program, perhaps it's useful to explain why it is a good idea to mix kids and guns. Let's examine the purpose of the 4-H shooting sports program. First and foremost, safety of the youth and adults in the program is a major focus. As you will see later in this presentation, the 4-H shooting sports has a stellar safety record that cannot be approached by any other youth sports activity. The program instills firearm safety and concepts such as muzzle control to youth until it becomes second nature. 4-H shooting sports does not condone or promote combat sports such as paintball because this activity runs counter with the safety concepts that are thoroughly taught in 4-H. You never hear the word weapon uttered in a 4-H shooting sports event or activity of any kind. Positive youth development is the goal of the program, and the firearm or archery equipment is only a vehicle to help us accomplish that mission. So just as the 4-H horse or livestock project, the animal is also the vehicle to achieve the positive youth development goal. Our focus on positive youth development explains why we are more concerned with creating champion kids, not necessarily champion shooters. Another major focus of the 4-H shooting sports is life skill development. So, is it safe to put firearms in the hands of youth? Well, speaking of safety, let's look at the record. The 4-H shooting sports program reached 450,000 youth in 2016. About half of that number were reached as part of a long-term, more extensive experience in a 4-H club environment. The other half were reached through short-term experiences such as camp and fairs. This program has been in operation since 1980. In that time period, it is estimated that more than 3 million member years of 4-H member contact has been achieved. So 3 million member years. It also in the same time period from 1980 to 2012, there have only been 6 documented injuries sustained in the 4-H shooting sports program. None of them were fatal or had catastrophic injuries. Now let's compare the safety record of 4-H shooting sports with other youth sports. Life insurance companies that provide 4-H with supplemental insurance policies for our regular 4-H programs insure our 4-H shooting sports at the same rate as all other activities. However, premiums for the 4-H horse or ATV projects are double those rates of shooting sports. And what do we do? What do those numbers look like when we compare injury rates with other youth sports? So we're going to look at this other youth sports data. Youth sports participation data that you will see comes from engagesports.com. It's for it's for youth ages 6 to 17. The youth sports data comes from Youth Sports Worldwide and is for total injuries of 19 and under. And more than 2.6 million children under ages 19 and under are seen in emergency departments for injuries related to sports and recreation each year, that as reported by the Center for Disease Control. So you'll see the sport in the first column, the annual participation numbers in the second column, and the number of injuries in the third column, and then the injury rate expressed by a percentage in the fourth column. The injury rates are obtained by dividing the number of injuries by the total number of participations. As you can see, sports like football and wrestling have the highest injury rate of all youth sports. And on this list, gymnastics and 4-H shooting sports have the lowest injury rates of the sports listed on the table, with the 4-H shooting sports by far the lowest rate. In fact, a young person is 4 times more likely to be injured playing football versus playing hockey, and 56,000 times more likely to be hurt playing soccer than being involved in 4-H shooting sports. And at the same time, a young person is 220,000 times more likely to be hurt playing football versus being involved in shooting sports. Or you could be like me, and I have a son that plays football and is in 4-H shooting sports. So 4-H shooting sports is one of the safest activities that a young person can be involved in. So people still worry about why we're going to create another school shooting situation like Columbine or what just happened in Florida if we put guns in the hands of kids. And that is not the case. Not likely. In addition to the life skills that a young person, or the life skill of personal safety and responsibility that is taught in 4-H, such a thing is unlikely to happen for the following reasons. First and foremost, safety is the main driver of the 4-H program, 4-H shooting sports program. Next, we place a significant adult in the lives of 4-H members. That significant adult could be a parent or an adult volunteer leader. The adults involved in the 4-H program are definitely positive influences in the lives of the young people that they serve. Another major reason for this hypothetical example that would never happen is that 4-H is a family-oriented activity. 4-H parents know what their kids are up to, and they know what other kids are up to. That's a novel concept. We also place young people involved in the 4-H shooting sports into positive peer groups that help and support each other. The 4-H program is focused on creating a safe and inclusive environment for young people that can counteract the bullying behaviors that are the root of many of these school shootings that have occurred. And last but not least, 4-H teaches young people to respect other people. These key developmental characteristics are missing from the backgrounds and lives of the youth and adults who perpetrate these acts of human violence. So what are 5 things that 4-H shooting sports does well? And these are, as we talk to people about why it's good to mix kids and guns, we need to remind them that, really what drives the 4-H program. So as in a David Letterman reverse order, which most of the kids today, the college freshmen, would not know who David Letterman was. Number 5, teaching first shot. We are teaching kids and adults the first shot fundamentals. Number 4, we are teaching adults to teach kids, and we do it very effectively. Life skill development. Life skill development is the focus of young people, is our focus. Positive youth development. This is the main staple of our program. And number 1 on the list of things that 4-H shooting sports does well, we practice and promote safety of firearms and for each other. So these are the things that separate the 4-H shooting sports program from other youth shooting programs. The goal is not to claim Olympic medals. Our goal is to create gold medal kids. So the minimum standards of the 4-H shooting sports program. There are 10 of these minimum standards that are in the operation of a 4-H program. These standards have been developed by the National Committee, and they are non-negotiable. 4-H National Headquarters supports these minimum standards in a way that helps ensure the safety of the program. So the first one, the National 4-H Shooting Sports Curriculum, is the established adult teaching curriculum for training adults to teach youth the shooting sports within the 4-H program. You can only use the 4-H shooting sports curriculum as a base. All instructors accept and abide by the National 4-H Shooting Sports Code of Conduct. And for those of you who have never seen the 4-H Shooting Sports Code of Conduct, here it is. I will respect all people and property. I will set a good example as a mentor and role model, conduct myself and the program in a professional and ethical manner, learn and implement positive youth development principles that guide the program, continue to expand my competencies in the subject matter I teach, will adhere to the National Shooting Sports Curriculum, national minimum standards of safety, and state-level best practices and policies. These are the things that we ask you to keep into your thinking anytime you are wearing your 4-H shooting sports instructor hat. Back to the minimum standards. So number 3, state, county, and club level 4-H shooting sports program should have a written risk management plan, which includes items such as emergency response and preparedness, insurance, safe storage of firearms and ammunition. There is a shooting or risk management plan or worksheet on the Nevada 4-H website. If you go to the shooting sports page, you will find a worksheet to work through on the risk management plan, and that is what we ask that you fill out. All certified 4-H shooting sports instructors must be a minimum of age 21 and have completed a state level 4-H shooting sports workshop with a specific discipline that they will be teaching. Now, I will say that in order to be in charge of a live fire range, they must be age 21 or older. You can have teen leaders that are helpers, but they cannot ever be left in charge. Number 5, state level 4-H shooting sports instructor certification workshops must provide a minimum of 12 hours of instruction. This includes a minimum of 9 hours of instruction in each specific discipline and a minimum of 3 hours of instruction in teaching positive youth development, life skills, and risk management. It is preferable and recommended that the state level certification workshops provide 15 hours of instruction composed of 12 hours of discipline instruction and 3 hours of instruction in teaching positive youth development, life skills, and risk management. To maintain certification as a 4-H shooting sports level 1 or level 2 instructor, one must teach or assist in instruction within the discipline certified at least once every 3 years. Only factory ammunition is used in 4-H shooting sports competitive events. Regarding simulated combat sports, including but not limited to paintball guns, airsoft, laser tag, or archery tag, pointing any type of gun, including paintball guns, airsoft guns, laser paintball, archery tag bows, and arrows or sighting devices at any person or any humanoid-shaped targets is inappropriate for a 4-H activity. That humanoid-shaped target includes the fun human zombie targets. So just so everybody is aware of that. You can use like the zombie mouse or the zombie chicken or whatever, the zombie pig, but you cannot use a zombie human target. Reactive targets, targets that make use of or are composed of live ammunition, explosive, flammable chemical substances, or pressurized containers are never to be used in any 4-H activity. And Cloverbud age 4-H youth are not allowed to participate in any live fire activity involving firearms, air rifles, air pistols, or archery equipment. There should be no doubt in your minds about these 10 minimum standards. There should be no wavering from these 10 minimum standards, because if you deliberately disregard one of these 10 commandments, you will, and if somebody gets hurt, or worse yet, somebody dies, then your fate is in the hands of the judge and jury. And if you disregard the recommendation of the national management bodies, such as the 4-H Shooting Sports Committee, which is a chartered entity of the National 4-H headquarters, or 4-H National Headquarters, and somebody gets hurt, there's a good chance that the university is not going to represent you or provide you with any kind of risk protection. My experience is that will not happen. If you are not following these 10 minimum standards, and you are not following what's in your job responsibilities as a shooting sports volunteer, then the university will not provide you with any kind of the liability insurance. On the other hand, if you act within the scope of your training, and if you follow the 4-H national minimum standards, and you do your best to avoid negligence, you're going to be okay. So state level best practices. Now that we understand those minimum standards of the 4-H shooting sports program, let's look at what we call best practices. So the difference between the minimum standards and the best practices is that the minimum standards are not negotiable. The best practices, on the other hand, allow for state-by-state differences based on state statute, differences in policies and rules at the different land-grant university systems, and the differences in the state 4-H policies. So we're going to talk about, right now we're going to talk about the national committee, what their recommendations are. I will tell you that this is going to be one of the things that our state advisory committee is going to start looking at in, one is, what are going to be our state level best practices based on, what the university is telling us we need to do now, which I said before is a little bit different than it's been in the past. So recognizing the diversity of the 4-H shooting sports program within each state, here are the recommendations. So eye protection. Adequate eye protection is required for all participants in muzzleloader, pistol, rifle, and shotgun disciplines. This includes the hunting and the Western Heritage live fire events. Such protection is strongly advised in archery as well. And so that includes coaches and spectators on or near the firing lines. They're subject to the same requirements. Ear protection. Adequate ear protection is also required for all participants in muzzleloader, pistol, rifle, and shotgun disciplines. This also includes the hunting and the Western Heritage live fire events. And again, those coaches and spectators that are on or near the firing line are subject to the same requirements. Footwear. In short, open-toe shoes of any kind are not recommended for the shooting line. So the equipment management, or the inventory control. Inventory list should be maintained by one individual. There needs to be a sign-in and sign-out and sign-in process that will help keep track of the equipment. Only improved instructors should be checking out equipment. Extension staff overseeing the program need to have access to all equipment and all records. That includes, the club. If your club, they should be able to have access to those. And then also they should have, all of those records. Equipment inventory should be audited annually. So for us, the equipment inventory is part of our risk management plan. I don't believe, it would be nice if we could do it annually, but knowing this state, I don't think that that's going to be possible. But I would expect that that every county will be going through an inventory audit probably once every 3 to 4 years. And if there isn't one of the reasons why we're getting to the point where we're getting a lot stricter on the inventory control and the equipment management is because if we did not have these processes in place, then the equipment gets lost, it's unaccounted for, and it can deteriorate because it's not getting repaired when it's damaged. So management and storage, the equipment management related to storage. So all firearms should be in a lockable cabinet or a safe with an open bolt or a clear bore indicator in place. They should be, all lock cabinets and safes should be in a secure locked storage area if possible, and keys and combinations should only be available to certified instructors and extension staff. And you're going to be seeing more about that from our university as well. So for ammunition, the simple practice of storing ammunition and securing that ammunition in a separate place from the firearm in which it should be used creates a level of protection against accidental discharge. So you really should not store them in the same location. All ammunition and again, multiple lock options offer that another layer of protection. So transportation. So all applicable local, state, and federal laws should be followed when transporting firearms. Only licensed drivers over the age of 18 should transport 4-H shooting sports equipment, and they should be transported in locked cases and not be visible from the outside of the vehicle. I have to just share a story with you. One time this is when I was in Idaho, and I had to go pick up a bunch of equipment. We had 22 rifles and air rifles that were they were in one county, and I was about 2 hours away. And we were having a shooting sports training that weekend. And so I made arrangements to drive down, pick up that equipment. And so on top of that, I brought down with me because I was in northern Idaho and this training was in southern Idaho. And I brought down with me all of our bows, all of our muzzle loader, like all of the other equipment. And so I had a minivan. And so I drove over, got the rifles and got the air rifles and got the 22s, and I was driving back and blew a tire on the freeway. And I was about an hour from Boise, about an hour away. And I thought, oh my gosh, where is my spare tire? Because my entire car was fully loaded. I mean, you couldn't see into it because it was, I had dark windows, but the entire back of my van, I did not have the seats in the back of my van. I only had like one seat in there for my son to ride in, and everything else was out. And this thing was fully loaded with all the shooting sports equipment. Thank goodness my spare tire was underneath the car, and I did not have to unload all of that equipment because I thought, oh, that's going to look very funny on the side of the freeway trying to, when I have all these guns unloaded on the side. So, there's just I was doing it correctly. They were not visible from the outside of the vehicle unless I lifted up the back end, but nothing you can do about that. But, and then, I'm thinking, what if a cop comes up here and looks at this and says, my gosh, what are you doing? It looked a little crazy. So youth and adult participations. So instructors have the right to refuse someone for participating in the program for safety reasons. If If you have somebody that does not, just keep screwing around, will not listen, will not do anything that you're asking them to do, you can ask them not to participate. It is important that we try and we provide accommodations for those with disabilities. If you have somebody with a disability, either physical or that you're not sure how you can accommodate that, call the county, who will then get a hold of the state office, and we will work with you on figuring that out. It is, we do have civil rights responsibilities that we must work with the audiences. So if it's something that I just absolutely can't accommodate, but for the most part, we can usually figure out a way. 4-H is open to anyone who is the appropriate age, as determined by our state. Within Nevada, it's 9 to 18. And Cloverbud youth ages 5 to 8 are not allowed to participate. So let's talk about the risk management plan. So there should be a written and current risk management plan in place for any of our state, county, or club level shooting sports activities or events. So within that, it needs to include goals. You can see these 5 things. A good risk management plan is going to address specific situations that might be encountered during the program. We need to think ahead about issues that might happen. So with goals of your program, simply put, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? And where do you intend to go with the program? Write it down. Personnel policies. So information about volunteer application and training procedures, state supervision ratios, state transportation of minor policies, etc. A job description. This is something that we're working on, is trying to get all of our 4-H volunteers in general to have a job description, but especially shooting sports volunteers. So the records, you need to keep an activity log of every meeting or practice session that's conducted that includes things like the date of the activity, the name of the instructors present, the names of the 4-H members and the family members that are present, a description of the activity that they conducted, a narrative of any unusual occurrences, a log of any injuries, and a signature line for the person filling out the form. And then supervision, written supervision plan, then it contains supervision requirements or policies that need to be followed. Some more items that you should have on there. It should include emergency response procedures. You should always know the procedure before you have to need it. So things like I said before, things like who's going to call 911, who has the first aid kit, those types of things. You should have information about the equipment care use and storage. That should be in there. Facilities information. What are unique things about the facility that need to be written down? Or what are some potential hazards or other oddities that you might want to put? And then anything else that you think needs to be added into there. Okay, so there are sample risk management plans on the National 4-H Shooting Sports website. We also have those on the this Nevada 4-H website. So either place you can go, but the one that is required in Nevada is the one from the Nevada 4-H website. So the risk management model. This section of the training really deals with risk management. So the original, the original risk management information that's been used in the 4-H shooting sports instructor training has been revised to be a little bit more streamlined for the look and the content. And so, but this is an important subject that cannot be left out. So what is risk? If you look at it in the simplest terms, it means a chance of loss. So what are risks within the 4-H shooting sports program? Can you name any risks for the youth or adults that are involved in the program? What about the injury to the 4-H member? Or even worse, a fatal injury to a 4-H member? What about the risk to a 4-H volunteer being on the wrong end of a civil lawsuit because of a claim of negligence that resulted in the injury of another person? So how are we going to protect ourselves or the others involved in the program and the program itself? Again, keeping it simple, risk management is a system to protect our assets by minimizing the potential for negative outcomes. So how would you describe the term assets, other than being the 6 points on a game of Scrabble? So assets are anything of value that is held by an organization or an individual. There are two types of assets. There are tangible assets that are financial in nature and that can be broken down into current or fixed assets. So things like cash and stock and facilities and land, etc. And the second type of assets are intangible. Those are things like our your reputation or the program's reputation, the trust, the character, integrity, and especially the people who make the 4-H program function. So there are 4 major steps in risk management efforts. Those include identification of the risks involved, the analysis of the risk, the evaluation of the risk, and the treatment of the risk, or how we choose to deal with the risks of the program. The first step, identification of the risks involved in the 4-H shooting sports program. You know, in life, there are very few, if any, activities that don't carry some kind of risk with it. I mean, you take a risk every morning when you get out of bed, and you take a risk every day when you drink a cup of coffee, and, you know, there's all these kinds of things. The Center for Disease Control reports that 250,000 people in the United States each year are injured in their own bathroom. So the chance of no risk is a rare thing. So now let's consider the shooting sports program, where we have firearms and sharp, pointy arrows in the hands of kids. Are there any risks involved there? And the answer is yes. So the next step, now we're going to analyze that risk. Are the 4-H shooting sports a high risk or low risk activity? The answer to that question is, it depends. If done with adequate training, supervision, vetted curriculum, and qualified staff to provide adequate oversight to the program, yes, it can be a very low risk endeavor, as explained earlier in the historically low injury rate of the 4-H shooting sports program. To get the answer to this question, you have to go on to the next step of evaluate the potential risk. So in the evaluation phase of the risk assessment model, we must determine the severity or the frequency of the risk. For example, if one 4-H member in 10,000 gets a paper cut each year from completing their 4-H record books, this would be an example of a risk of low severity and low frequency. Probably a risk that we're willing to live with, right? If 1 in 10 4-H members, or even 1 in 100 4-H members, or even 1 in 1,000 4-H members in the shooting sports program are injured, requiring hospitalization each year, it could be assumed that the program would carry risk that was too severe or too frequent for a land-grant university to have anything to do with. In reality, most of the risks involved in the 4-H shooting sports program are very low frequency, but potentially high severity. So how do we handle those risks? The treatment of those risks has been that can be identified, have been thought of. How do we choose to address or handle the risk of our program? The most absolute certain way to avoid risk in this program is to not have the program. And you know what? If we don't do a good job at risk management, that's exactly what the university administrator could recommend be the preferred method for managing the potential risk of the 4-H shooting sports program. And that is happening in some places around the country. And so that's exactly what we want to avoid. All it takes is one incident in a state for that state to suddenly find themselves with no 4-H shooting sports program where there once was one. And there are some counties that choose not to have one because of that. All of our actions should be guided by this chilling thought, and it can happen in the blink of an eye. So if we agree that completely avoiding the risk that might be associated with the program is not a desirable outcome, let's look at the other options. If we can choose to retain the risk, which means we're willing to put up with some level of risk because it's natural to have some kind of inherent risk in just about everything we do in 4-H. As I mentioned before, who thought carving pumpkins would cause lawsuits and injuries, that required multiple surgeries? It wasn't just one, it was multiple, and lawsuits. So there's risk involved in working with kids. There's risks involved in managing in managing a volunteer-led youth development program. And there are certainly risks involved when you consider that the program uses firearms and sharp pointed arrows in the hands of kids. So now that we agree that we need to retain the risk in providing this program, I'll ask you, are there ways that we can reduce that risk that we've decided to retain? Well, sure there are. We can reduce the risk by following our state's best management practices and the state 4-H policies. We can reduce the risk by requiring a minimum of 12 hours of instruction before 4-H volunteers can become a certified 4-H shooting sports instructor. We can reduce the risk by way of simple educational approaches such as MAT, muzzle, action, trigger, that are taught in the rifle discipline, for example. The 4-H shooting sports program utilizes many methods to reduce the risk of this valuable 4-H youth development program. So once we decide to retain and reduce said risk, we can also share the risk. An example is when we purchase supplemental health insurance and supplemental accident insurance for 4-H members. In the case of injury, the cost of the medical treatment can be shared with the insurance company. Plus, the simple act also conveys that the youth's best interest is our main concern. So there you have it. This is the risk management model that guides the 4-H shooting sports program. So what does this mean to you as an instructor? First, you have the duty to provide a safe environment for the program. Second, you should conduct activities in a reasonable and prudent manner in accordance with recognized protocol and procedure. If you don't remember anything from this training, I want you to remember those two words: reasonable and prudent. Those are the two words that a jury will use to assess your actions, and should anyone get hurt on your watch as a 4-H shooting sports instructor. So you had better make sure that, and you had better think about each and every action as whether they would be considered reasonable and prudent by a jury of your peers. This concept is the heart of our risk management model. So let's talk a little bit about the concept of negligence. Failure to perform a legally owed duty is a reasonable and prudent person would perform with the failure resulting in a consequence, someone being hurt, that should have been foreseen. This is the definition of negligence. But the "I didn't know" defense won't protect you from the legal ramifications of negligence. For negligence to be proven, there's 4 things that need to happen. A duty must be owed. Let's say your duty is to provide a safe environment. An example, always having a certified 4-H instructor on the range when the range is hot. The duty must be breached. For example, if you're the only certified instructor on the range and you don't close down and secure the range while you take a bathroom break. There are actual damages. Someone is hurt by an accidental discharge at close range because a beginning shooter was on the line in your absence. And 4, there might be a proximal cause established. If you would have been on the line, the accident would most likelihood have not happened. So let's think about negligence in another way. Let's think about it as a negligence meter. If your actions would be judged by a jury of your peers as being reasonable to very reasonable, the chances of your actions being in the negligible area of the gauge would be rare. However, if you start flirting around the barely reasonable or unreasonable part of this picture, you might find yourself in the negligent part of the picture. It's not a good place to be. Your number one duty is, okay, so with the negligence spectrum well painted in your brain, let's talk about the duties that are owed by you to the 4-H as a 4-H shooting sports instructor. Your first and foremost duty is to use and follow the established 4-H shooting sports curriculum, lesson plans, and procedures. If you take it upon yourself to vary from the 4-H curriculum and somebody gets hurt, a jury might see that as not being reasonable or prudent. That said, can we add activities and procedures from other shooting sports organizations? Sure. For example, we use the shooting event rules and procedures from the other national governing bodies at the 4-H Shooting Sports National Championships, such as the Civil Marksmanship Program, which would be deemed reasonable and prudent by a jury of your peers. But as for our core safety procedures and positive youth development purposes, you need to be using and following the 4-H shooting sports curriculum as a foundation for your instruction. Duties owed by the 4-H shooting sports instructor also include: you must properly plan for the activity. You must properly provide proper instruction. You must explain the inherent risks to the members. And we do have waivers. Every year the young people sign waivers when they enroll in 4-H. But if you would like a separate 4-H, or if you would like a separate assumption of risk waiver for the 4-H shooting sports program, then please talk to your county educator about that. And you can have every young person sign that. You must always monitor for injury. And then if you have a duty to everybody that's involved to ensure that the equipment that you're using is safe, that you don't have a gun that misfires every 5th shot or randomly. You need to provide for proper emergency response when it's needed. You need to know where a phone is, or you need to know that you have cell phone service, etc. You must maintain adequate records, and you must provide close supervision. You need to be watching the range and not talking to other people. And you must always inspect. Inspect your equipment, inspect your facilities, inspect the weather, and inspect the people in your charge all the time. Wow, that's a lot to remember. You need to write it all down. And guess what? That's your risk management plan. So let's think about this. So you've carefully thought out all the angles. You've done it 1,000 times. This comes naturally to you. You know what you've been doing. You've been trained to do it your whole life. Nothing can possibly go wrong, right? Think again. To conclude this discussion on risk management, I'm going to share with you a true story that happened that hopefully is going to drive home the importance of this subject. This is something that happened in another state. I was actually not directly involved in this, but as soon as it happened, we all heard about it and scared us all to death. So just listen to this. So it's going to be a bad day when this happens at your county 4-H shoot. This is a true story that happened on June 5th of 2015 in a state and a county which is going to remain unnamed, and it involved a boy named Cody. Not my Cody, another Cody. It was the results of a county 4-H shoot. It's called 53 lead pellets from a 12-gauge shotgun. 53 lead pellets from a 12-gauge shotgun shell at close range. Not good. How did it happen? So it was your average run-of-the-mill county 4-H qualifying match prior to the state level shoot. After the qualifying match, the 4-H members had a fun shoot with various types of reactive targets. Lots of fun stuff. After the fun shoot was over and all the firearms had been removed from the range and stored, the 4-H members and their little brothers and sisters were downrange cleaning up from the fun shoot. Now what you need to know at this fun shoot was there were 3 reactive targets that were operated by way of shooting a .22 caliber round at the front at the front of a steel target. I want to make sure I get the story right, so I am kind of reading this one. So you shoot a .22 round at the front of a steel target that contained a live 12-gauge shotgun shell. When struck with the .22 round, it would discharge the 12-gauge shotgun shell. The shell could be a regular 12-gauge, or it could be a modified to remove the shot and replace the black powder, which could create a big bang. On this day, the shells were regular shotgun shells with shot in them. And it seemed as though nobody had been monitoring the status of these 3 reactive targets. Only 2 of the 3 had been discharged during the course of the fun shoot. This resulted in a live, locked and loaded and cocked firearm, primitive as it may be, but still, a live firearm being downrange among the group of kids who were picking up the range. Okay, so you can see where this is headed. So young and helpful Cody, who was 7 at the time, was downrange helping to clean up. Cody walked up to the still reactive target and pulls it out of the ground, and he then drops it, and the 12-gauge shell discharges at the range of about 2 feet from his upper torso. The result was 53 lead pellets in this young man's shoulder, neck, and face. This was not a good day in 4-H world in this state or the country. And June 5th, 2015 was a tough day for Cody. How bad was it? Cody could have been fatally injured, permanently disfigured, or suffered long-term injuries. The 4-H program in the county automatically was shut down by the LGU by the land-grant university pending an investigation of the incident. And the entire 4-H shooting sports program was in danger of being shut down. So we all need to learn from this experience and ask ourselves, how do we keep something like this from ever happening again? Step 1, think about every bad thing, even unimaginable, wild, and weird things that could possibly happen in the way that you're conducting that activity or event. Step 2, you then engineer those bad things out of the activity or the event beforehand. So what are the bad things that allowed this to happen? Because of the potential bad things that happened with this type of reactive target, there is now a national safety standard for 4-H shooting sports regarding reactive targets that you've learned about already. So the number 1 item to prevent this activity would have been never to use a device such as a risk management or such as a risk management downside in any 4-H shooting sports activity. There are many ways someone could have gotten hurt with this type of target, even during the shoot, and it should never have been part of the 4-H program. Another factor is that Cody was 7 years old at the time of the event, cloverbud age. At that time, most states had strict policies regarding the involvement of cloverbuds in any live fire activity. But Cody wasn't injured during a live fire activity. He was just helping clean up the range. So the other lesson might be that we have to really think through any involvement by cloverbuds in a potentially hazardous situation, even if it doesn't involve live fire. And by the way, there is now a national 4-H shooting sports safety standard regarding cloverbud involvement in 4-H shooting sports, which you've already learned about. So some good things came from the risk management front that day. First of all, Cody's mom was a range safety officer that day. She's a good mom and a great 4-H shooting sports instructor. But if the youngster injured on that day would have been Johnny's friend from down the street, there could have been a real possibility that a civil or even criminal lawsuit could have been filed. There's even a bigger possibility that this state could have lost their 4-H shooting sports program for good. The university attorney could have easily decided to avoid the risk of this program by shutting it down. They got really lucky on that one. Another good thing that happened on the risk management front was that now there are national standards regarding reactive targets and cloverbud involvement. And most of all, they were really lucky because this is a picture of Cody relaxing at home 4 days after the incident. You can see that he's doing fine. Thank goodness. So the bottom line of this story is really that risk management is real. There are consequences to it. That makes it a very important topic for each of you to be in command of. It's important, and we can't depend on luck to save us. So thanks for listening to this session. I know that it took longer than we thought, but I hope you took really good notes, because what are 2 things that you want to remember? Reasonable and prudent. Okay. And have a great night and a great training. Thank you.